people whose marriages lasted less than a year, months, weeks, days, or even hours, when did you realize that you had made a mistake and why? So, I had a friend who married one of the most horrible people I've ever met. So charming at first, but within the first 3 months of them being together, we all started to notice a few things and we decided none of us liked him. One day, we saw hand-shaped bruises on her arms, and literally the next day, they were at the courthouse getting married. We had a small gathering shortly afterwards, which he ended up turning into their wedding celebration, bachelor party, whatever he could to make it all about him. He then got extremely drunk and basically tried to end her life in front of all of us. She told us they didn't have the rings yet, but they would get them soon, and he walked over to her and started strangling her for embarrassing him. She ended up breaking down and realizing that for the entire 4 months of their relationship and 9 days of their marriage, he had progressively gotten more and more abusive, and she made a mistake. Story number 3. On our honeymoon, she didn't want to do anything but fight, so I left 2 days early to be with my dog. Then she stopped wearing her ring and refused to tell people she was married, referring to me as her boyfriend instead. But the final straw was when my grandpa was dying and she said, "I wish he'd just hurry up and die already. I'm tired of this apartment being so depressing all the time." Yeah, made it 4 months in all before filing for divorce. Edit. I want to thank you all for the support and the interest in my little story here. I've been getting a lot of repeat questions, so I'll put a little FAQ here. How long were we together? We were together for about a year, give or take a little. Did I notice the red flags? The relationship seemed relatively normal until we got married. She had her share of issues, bad childhood, severe anxiety, bulimia, but I was dumb and thought I could fix them. If there were red flags, why did I marry her? Well, I just had a really bad breakup with my girlfriend of 4 years a few months before meeting my first wife. We had made plans for our future, marriage, kids, the works, and the breakup really messed me up. I was insecure and afraid of being alone, so I probably would have married anyone. Young, dumb, and unaccustomed to heartbreak. Continuing, did I keep the dog? Of course. I may have gotten rid of the wife, but no chance in hell was I getting rid of the dog. We took her and moved her far away, and now she's got lots of people around all the time to spoil her and fatten her with treats. She recently got a little brother who tolerates. And finally, are things better now? Very much so. I took a few years of being single and just learning who I was and who I wanted to be, and I'm happily remarried. And this time, it has stuck. I'm stuck, and my wife won't let me leave. Send help. Story number 4. I had 2 good friends who were brothers. They were party animals, out drinking at bars all the time, sleeping with different women every weekend, recreational drugs. Their idols were the whole Jackass crew back in the day. They just loved that whole bachelor lifestyle. And to be honest, I was a bit jealous of the fun they were having. I was in a longer-term relationship for many years. Eventually, the younger brother settled down and got engaged to a really nice girl. Something broke in the older brother's mind, and he suddenly was in some sort of race to get married before his younger brother. He kept living the bachelor lifestyle, but then one day announced to all of us he was getting engaged and to be married with his fiancée, and they had set a wedding date to be married 6 months before his younger brother. None of us ever met this girl before we found out he was engaged. When we did meet her, it was clear he'd not been open with her about his lifestyle. She was a very prim and proper lady, very shy, quiet. They worked together, so she only knew the professional side of him. Over the months leading to the wedding, his partying kept going. He was cheating on her with one-night stands, but she was oblivious. Our group of friends told him he needed to tell her what he was doing, but he refused. I was eventually nominated to be the one to tell her before it was too late. I met her for coffee and told her how he was cheating on her and about the drugs he was using. She was generally taken aback, but she told me to my face she was still going to marry him and that she could change him. I left with a clear conscience after that. Fast forward to their wedding day, and it is an absolute mess. He is drunk before the reception even starts and passes out in a corner sometime after dinner. As I am leaving, I say goodbye to his bride, and I can see it in her eyes. The definition of regret. They ended up being together for exactly 1 year. Her final straw was when she really wanted to go out for a special brunch for their 1-year anniversary. She made plans at a fancy place, and he told her he was going out to party the night before, but would be home in time to get some sleep before their anniversary started. Well, he ended up hooking up with some chick he picked up at the bar, and when he finally made it home the next afternoon, his wife had packed her bags and left. I felt bad for her at first, but then I remembered how I laid everything on the table with her, and she still did it. I've never seen or spoken to her again. My friend ended up repeating his pattern, and he is on his 4th marriage now, but he does seem to have finally settled down this time. Story number 5. To be honest, I didn't really want to be married to her. However, she was determined to get married by age 24 regardless. And at the time, I had significant difficulty saying no. I was working 60-plus odd hours a week in a kitchen to help pay for everything, and I was struggling with my mental health at the time, and we grew further and further apart emotionally. Well, I find out less than 5 months into the marriage that she had been unfaithful to me for at least a year, so 6 to 7 months before the wedding. Whilst she had been planning it, she had been sleeping with other people. While she had been putting serious pressure on me to provide money for her dream wedding, she also had an abortion because she didn't know whether I would have been the father or not. When I found this all out, I basically had a breakdown and tried taking my own life. I also spent a few years after this blaming myself for the breakdown of my marriage and her behavior. Story number 6. Wasn't my marriage, but I am involved in the story. Basically, my ex-girlfriend's boss left his wife on their honeymoon because she and him were having an affair. They had the wedding and flew off to Bali, but she was sneaking off into the bathroom to send my then-girlfriend chicken pics from his honeymoon, and I saw one of the pictures and confronted her. She admitted to it and messaged him back to tell him that I had found out. And my understanding is that he basically came out of the bathroom, told his wife, "I think this was a mistake. We shouldn't have gotten married," and then he got on a plane and flew home. He left her there on her own, on her effing honeymoon, with no explanation. In the end, I had to be the one to go over to her place and tell her what had really happened because he wouldn't own up to it. So, I think the marriage lasted all about 3 days. Edit. Just to add a few additional details to clarify, as I wasn't expecting this to get so much attention, this all happened like 10 years ago. She was my first girlfriend from high school, and we had been together for 10 years, so I was 24 at the time, and I'm actually fine about it now because we were unhappy, and it really wasn't meant to be, and I am now happily married. The husband and my ex were having a full-blown affair and had been sleeping together for several months before the wedding. It just wasn't wiener pictures being sent, by the way. He was also sending her just generally sexual and lovey-dovey messages about how much he missed her and how much he wished it was her there with him instead of his wife. However, the message which I happened to see, which blew the whole thing wide open, did include a picture of his wiener, as well as sexual pictures that she had sent to him in return. He walked out on his new wife because he knew he had been rushed, but didn't tell her why. So she was sat around thinking she had done something wrong. A couple of weeks later, my friend called me with a message. You see, I had told him what happened, and he had told someone who actually ended up knowing her and had told her. This is how she learned the truth. Then, through that same chain of people, she got the message back to me requesting that I call her so we could talk, along with her number, and I had actually met her a couple of times before through my ex and her work, but I barely knew her. So I called her. She invited me over, and we had a long talk, and I told her everything I knew from my side. She hadn't learned any of this until she had heard it through that friend, so it was pretty rough. I moved on quickly, but they had a really rough and messy divorce. Australian law says you must first try 1 year separation before you can divorce. However, I did run into her a few years ago, and she was remarried and seemed very happy. As for the two offending parties, they did start dating publicly, which I think caused a lot of drama and friction in their personal lives. Hugely so at their work with the other employees, as you can imagine. I heard they broke up after a few years together. Edit number 2. Bonus gossip. Also, my wife just reminded me of another detail. I told her the story before. My ex was invited to the wedding, but I wasn't. She said it was because they were trying to do it on a budget. I find out later that at the wedding, she got really drunk and upset, obviously because the newfound fellow was marrying someone else, and sort of started causing a scene. It was apparently bad enough that the best man had to get her in the back of his car and leave the wedding early to take her home, as it looked like she was about to spill the beans in front of everyone. Story number 7. My male cousin went to a very conservative Church of Christ university where the women who attended there are infamous for trying to get their MRS degree. The girl he was dating was no different. They got married 6 months after they graduated with a huge southern wedding, 10 bridesmaids, 250 guests, at least 7 different wedding showers, a band, an open bar at the rehearsal dinner, etc. They get married and are divorced 4 months later because she was cheating on him the entirety of their relationship. They had sex once on their honeymoon and less than 3 times after that. Some people just want a wedding, not a marriage. And of course, that female dog kept all the wedding gifts that they had received, even the ones from his family. Look, okay, I don't approve of violence, but if this happened in a cartoon, I would not be against an anvil dropping on her head. If she was a character in The Walking Dead, I would not be against her throat being ripped out by a couple of walker zombies, I'm just saying. And if this was a procedural drama TV series, I hope she gets fired and then blows up. Anyway, next story. Story number 8. My ex was with a woman for 5 years and married for 2 to 3 months. She had cheated on him and got caught before the wedding, but they somehow managed to make it work out. She had also pressured him into marriage by giving him money and saying, "If you don't come back with a ring, it's over." So 2 to 3 months into the marriage, he had noticed that she was acting shady again, excusing herself to the bedroom randomly with her iPad and going to her girlfriend's house, she's straight, at any given hour to have sleepovers and hang out. One day, she left to her girlfriend's as usual, and he found that she had left her iPad this time, which she usually keeps close guarded. He found exchanges between her and at least 3 different men. One message from her to the man that bags the groceries saying that she was pregnant, and my ex cannot have children. The other 2 men that she had cheated with was a coworker and the security guard at the local mall. Story number 9. My sister got pregnant while dating a very controlling guy. She wasn't sure about getting married and was trying to decide if they should even stay together. She went home to spend some time with my parents to figure it out. The boyfriend showed up with his parents, and the 3 of them spent the entire weekend arguing with my sister about why she should get married to him. On Monday, she went to the courthouse and got married. And he turned out to be just as controlling as she claimed. He had been having all her paychecks deposited into a common account so he could invest it. He gave her an allowance to live on. He refused to pay for any maternity clothes or nursing bras because she won't be wearing them for very long, and my parents bought them for her. After child number 2, she decided that she was done, so she had an IUD installed. When he found out, he was livid. He claimed that, as the man of the house, it was his decision how many children they would have. And after a month of arguing, she had it removed. Then came child 3 and 4. She earned a very difficult professional degree with a very high income potential, but ended up as a stay-at-home mom dependent on his income. He handles all the money, and he makes all the decisions in their household. I see her every few years, and when we do visit, it is very clear that he likes to be in control. He insists on driving everyone to where we're going, and then he leaves on his own side trips, making everyone wait for him to return. We now make it a point to drive ourselves while we're out there. Story number 10. 1 week after being married, exactly 7 days, I heard him in the bathroom with the shower on, but he was talking on the phone, as if the shower was loud enough so that I couldn't hear him. Anyway, I grabbed the phone and ran. I mean, ran out the back door to the other side of the pool, so no matter which way he came towards me, I would move the opposite direction. No surprise, it was a girl. She told me he never mentioned he had a wife or was seeing anyone, and they apparently had been dating for months. He told me a BS story of how he kept trying to end it with her, but she was possessive and wouldn't leave him alone and kept calling. I was 19 and stupid, so I stayed with him, but I knew at that moment I had made a mistake in marrying him. Thank God we didn't have any children, but we stayed together for 4 years, and I endured more than any woman ever should. 15 years later, he's now in prison, and it's no surprise. Story number 11. We got married by mail, a double proxy, only available from one U.S. state. We're both military, and I actually knew before we got our marriage certificate that it wasn't working, because he became insanely controlling after we moved to Germany together. He would scream at me when I would ask him to go on road trips on the weekends to see the adorable little German towns. He would scream at me in front of all of his friends. My friends were never invited over. He did not allow me to have access to my own money, which went into our joint account. And when I would buy something I felt I needed on Amazon, he'd scream at me. This would usually be soaps. I have very sensitive skin and can't use the shampoo body wash combos that are made for men. And he would scream at me over the littlest things like how I folded our towels after they dried. The final straw was when we went on our honeymoon to Greece, and he brought 2 guy friends along. He refused to have sex with me and even told me he really didn't want to have sex at all anymore. And then he publicly humiliated me by screaming at me in a very public venue around a lot of strangers. He of course was cool to his friends and they went swimming. I sat in a beach chair and cried. I just knew it. We made it about 4 months before I moved out. Story number 12. Not the person married, but the brother-in-law of the groom/brother of the bride. Lasted less than a year married, several dating. He treated my sister like sun-baked horse crap. And while honestly she is a pile of sun-baked horse crap, you shouldn't treat your damn wife like it. Nearly got the cops called on him several times while they were together, and they ended up breaking it off because my sister finally got fed up with his crap. For those interested in how they're doing, last I heard, the dumb effer, she called a husband, got a job but nothing else. And my sister went through another marriage that lasted less than a year because they got married almost as soon as they started dating, which ended up well. Full sarcasm, by the way. She cheated on him at least 12 times according to her estimation. She also apparently has goo-goo eyes for someone who went to jail for aggravated assault and is going back to jail, also for aggravated assault. She's well aware that her attraction to crap men exists. She admits it herself that she wants an abusive relationship despite it being, abusive and horrible, and nothing I've said helps. I have since cut contact with all parties due to some long-standing family bullcrap that's nearly as old as I am. But damn, if her last 2 marriages weren't a giant mistake. Story number 13. Not myself, but my oldest sister. She has been married 5 times. The first one was at 19. They divorced because they were young and not ready to be married. The second marriage, she wasn't sure if she wanted to be married, and despite my mom advising her to walk away, got married anyway. He cheated, she left. Third marriage lasted 10 years, but they fought a lot. He was a doctor, she's a nurse. Two intelligent people who couldn't talk to each other about their problems. The fourth husband was my favorite. He was kind-hearted and the most loving and supporting spouse you could ever hope for. I think she got bored and met someone who she was on a work trip with and met another doctor. She sent us an email saying that her and the fourth spouse were starting to feel like they were just friends and she was moving to New Zealand to start a new life. She wasn't fooling us. We knew there was a new dude. About 6 months later, she announced she had a new boyfriend, and a year after that, she said that they had been married. The kicker in all of this is, during my wedding, my very sweet English grandmother said to her, "Oh, I do hope that your marriage to your fourth husband works out." And she got upset by this. But I don't blame my grandma for pointing out her revolving door of husbands. Oh man, I wish I could invite the fourth husband back into our family. We really miss him and his family. Story number 14. We married legally when we found out I was pregnant after trying for 3 years. The plan was to marry at the courthouse, then get some tests done to see why I wasn't getting pregnant. Well, it happened backwards. By the time I gave birth, we were already married legally, but not in front of a priest, and we planned to have our wedding and to baptize our son. So, a 2-in-1 ceremony, and when our son was 5 months old, I went to our home country to prepare everything that needed to be prepared for the big event, and my husband stayed in the country where we were living and working. This was roughly 3 weeks before the event. The time I spent away from my husband felt like a breath of fresh air, like I was spending my days underwater, and I was finally free to just breathe. I reverted to my old happy self, smiling and joking all day long with family and friends. I realized it, but I decided to go on with the wedding as we had already had a kid, and I really thought after everything, my husband will be less manipulative and less controlling, and he would realize what truly matters. But no, he came home 1 week before the wedding, and we fought, and I cried almost daily. The wedding did happen, and everything was somehow perfect. And 2 days after the wedding, we got into a huge fight about some missing money. In my country, the bride and the groom received money from everyone invited to the wedding, and he ended up leaving me and our son. We divorced 4 months later. I realized a lot of stuff being away from him, but I lied to myself that he would care about me and our son, but he only ever cared about himself. Story number 15. I met her as a fellow soldier in AIT. She was crazy fun, but then something happened where she failed out and then switched to AITs. Before she left, we got engaged after going out for about 5 months. At her other post, she called and said a few times she just wanted to be with me, so she would fake a Section 8 to get a discharge and come back and join me. So all this goes down, and it turns out it wasn't fake. She was full-blown bipolar with a few other personality disorders thrown in the mix. It was about 10 months of holy hell. She had no job but expected me to support her lifestyle on a private salary. She got a new car, upgraded from an apartment to townhouse, and managed to rack up $30,000 in credit card debt in my name. I didn't know this because she hid the bills. This doesn't include the physical attacks either. She would start fistfights with me out of the blue, sometimes in public just to see if tough guys in the area would react, or run into the bedroom when I was sleeping and just dump cold water on me just for fun. The final straw was when she wanted her ex-boyfriend from high school to come live with us because he was a recovering junkie and needed help. So I put her on a plane to go get him, but with a one-way ticket. She then cleaned out what little cash I had left in the bank account. I called my 1SG to tell him I wasn't supporting her, but then disappeared entirely. I looked her up years later and she was busted with said boyfriend for a long string of shoplifting charges and trying to fraudulently claim various benefits from 3 different states at the same time. It was a meth junkie thing. A 10-month marriage, technically 2 years, the judge granted the divorce after 1 year of abandonment, took me 6 years of working, 2 to 3 jobs to dig my way out. This was all before the age of 21 for me. So, since we're mentioning military people, I have a relevant story about a longtime friend of mine whose life was already not the best, not horrible, but definitely not the best, and then joined the military, and it got worse. Let me tell you, girlfriends, pregnancy scares, marriages, cheating over and over, and just always in a relationship. It was like in Seinfeld how Jerry had a new girlfriend every other episode. And I remember one time he unironically said to me, "Man, I've been single for 2 weeks. I feel so lonely." And I was like, oh my God, bro. And then I think what his final huzzah was him punching his fiance in the face of a gas station parking lot. And then he got dishonorably discharged from the military. And none of these relationships or marriages lasted more than a year for one reason or another, all ridiculous reasons. And I tried to help the guy as best I could, but as I'm sure we all know, some people just don't want to be helped. Anyway, next story. Story number 16. About 2 months in, I found all his saved conversations and pictures of 14 to 16-year-olds documenting their meetings and hookups. He was 24, getting BJs from underage girls. Edit. More of the story. When I found out, I left him and confronted him about it. He held me against a wall and told me he was the only person who will ever love me, implying if I didn't stay with him and shut up, I would be alone forever. I got really depressed and told one person who went back to him, and he denied it. Then him and his mom took me to a hospital and had me locked up in the mental ward because they said I was delusional and wanting to self-unalive. I looked depressed, and the truth sounded terrible. I was locked in a room for 10 days. The doctor said I could leave if I just go home with my nice, loving husband. To all his friends and family, I am that girl who went crazy. I heard later he also told people I was on drugs and sleeping around a lot. I'm sure he never stopped, but coming from me, no one cares. Story number 17. My story, but not my story. I was 6 years old when my mom got married. My mom isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. My uncle worked at a state mental hospital. He's some bigwig now, and introduced my mom to this man working there. I think he was the janitor? Years later, they spoke of it, and I distinctly remember my uncle saying, "I introduced you to him as a joke. I didn't expect you to run off and marry the guy." And I answered the door when he picked her up for their first date. It was the first time I felt a primal instinct. I opened the door, looked at this man, and felt my heart and intestines just drop into the pit of my stomach. I didn't know the reason he was there, just a very bad feeling about him. So I did what any intelligent 6-year-old would do and slammed the door in his face. She married the guy after a couple of months, and to be honest, despite my first instincts on the guy, I ended up really liking him. He would shower me with attention and take me out to get food if I asked. I was neglected and made my own food a lot. I only remember good things about the guy. But honestly, looking back, he may have been grooming me. Either he was, or he just cared about a sad little girl, and it looked bad because he was insane. Regardless, I trusted my instincts, and looking back, I think he was some type of dangerous. I don't remember the crazy behavior. I've been told a lot of pacing and speaking and yelling to himself at night. I probably slept through it. My mom divorced him after 3 months, and he tried to file for custody of me. I was warned to watch out and find an adult immediately if I see him. He showed up once more with flowers for my mom, and I saw him walking up and ran inside. I wonder how things turned out for poor old Willis. Story number 18. Okay, so this isn't an ended in a year story. It's actually worse because it's still going 13 years later. But I figured it would be okay as this has turned into more of a terrible marriage stories thread. Okay, so I know a guy, not a friend, but just a guy I know. He was a Marine, 20 to 21 years old. He meets a girl. She's fun, ex-meth head, cute, kinda wild, dumb as a brick, but hey, he's no Albert Einstein himself, so it works. Smash cut to a few months later, she's pregnant. They decide to get married and have the kid. Again, young, dumb kids. Well, he gets deployed to Afghanistan right before or after the kid is born, I can't remember. And he is gone for like 16 months or something. And when he gets back, he finds out his sweet bride, who has been cashing his checks and living in his house, has gotten back with her meth dealer ex. And she is doing meth and effing the dealer with the kid there, in the studio apartment. So basically, he comes back to find his kid has had a front row seat to mommy sucking the pipe, then sucking his pipe for the first year and a half of his life. Now here's the sad part. He went from "I'm getting a divorce" to "she made a mistake and I forgive her" in like 4 days. Now, like 15 years later, they are still together. They have had like 2 more kids since then, live with his parents, both work dead-end jobs, and are totally effed over in life. Every few years, she has an issue of some sort and like moves out for a month or something. They then reconcile and everything is fine. I know all of this because they love to play it out all on Facebook, which was humorous until I saw that their son now has a Facebook and sees everything. Basically, the story of a marriage that should have ended in under a year, but didn't. Story number 19. Some girl I know. They lived in different cities. Most of the relationship was long distance. They agreed he'd move to her city eventually and got engaged. She started seeing red flags halfway through the wedding planning, and he took her to a party at his friend's place right after she got LASIK surgery, even though she didn't want to go. Got so drunk, he was practically unconscious. She had to drive them back with compromised vision in the middle of the night. They had a huge fight afterwards, and she didn't have the balls to call it off then, so compromised and stuck with them. Right before the wedding day, he complained about the wedding venue even though they picked it out together. Didn't show up for the pictures, was overall being a jerk. She knew she effed up, but somehow decided she would go through with it and figure it out after. He never apologized. He went back to his city, and they never saw each other again. Their marriage ended before it began. Story number 20. Not me, but my dad. According to him, he realized his mistake the first few weeks or so, with about a year to know for sure. My first stepmother was very controlling, and the prenup they wrote before marriage was apparently fought tooth and nail over, with her demanding some ridiculous things. But also, she didn't like me and would berate me over everything because it wasn't her way. Everything from the temperature of the house to manners. I'm not saying my manners were bad, but she wanted high-class manners, like multiple forks and honorific manners. My dad confided in me years later that he was ashamed he didn't stick up for me as often because, well, they were married, and he lived with her more often and didn't want her complaining he didn't back her up all the time. He also said he didn't leave because he, quote, didn't want to put me through a second divorce, which in hindsight was a pretty poor excuse. After I graduated from high school and joined the military, he split with her. The divorce process took almost a year because she, again, fought tooth and nail over the prenup, trying to cut him out of everything and claiming insurance policies for stuff like art and sculptures they had collected with zero evidence. Even the judge nearly lost her crap when she couldn't provide any paperwork or blatantly lied to cheat the prenup. I fully expect her to be arrested for fraud one day. My relationship with my dad was pretty battered by this time. Since then, we've slowly begun to repair it. He's remarried now again, but to a much nicer and caring woman and friend of the family. Recently celebrated their second anniversary with a camping trip together. Story number 21. This was two people I had been friends with, and their marriage lasted slightly longer than a year, but I knew it wouldn't work from the get-go. A, because I knew he was gay. B, because he cheated on her repeatedly with another of our friends. He literally would date her, jump to the other girl, and she'd lure him back. And repeat. So they finally got married, and she wanted to start a family. He wasn't keen. Instead, they suggested they go live in Canada for a year, from the UK, and then they'd start a family when they got back. A year later, they're back in the UK, but they're not starting a family. He left her to be with his best man. I'd known him since we had been infants together in school, and he was in the year above me, but we'd played together, and I'd always known that he was gay. Apparently, he didn't know until he'd married a woman, lived in Canada for a year, and then decided his best man was better as boyfriend material. So strange. Story number 22. We were together for 8 years before getting married and had lived together for 4. The year we got married was terrible. His stepdad was killed in a car accident, and I became his mom's emotional caregiver. I was in my last semester of grad school and dealing with a very stressful internship. The stress of those two things brought a major depressive episode. I took a medical withdrawal from school, effectively dropping out. The wedding went according to plan and was one of the best nights until I was served with gluten. I have celiacs, and I spent the first 2 weeks of my marriage in intense pain on the couch. We moved states in July and started to realize that we had accomplished the goals we'd been working towards our entire relationship. The sex became practically non-existent. We became roommates periodically, trying to date each other again, and my depression became worse. I ended up being hospitalized after Christmas for a self-unaliving attempt. While I was in the hospital, everything felt like it was going to be fine now that I was getting help. We returned home and things hadn't magically changed. About a week later, we broke up. Now we're both happier than we had been in years and have refound our friendship. It's not all bad. Story number 23. About halfway through the wedding planning, I was young and did not know how to extract myself from the situation without causing disappointment. I guess it was pretty obvious to everyone, though. My mom says that the limo to the venue felt like a hearse. And my dad, while walking me down the aisle, told me that I didn't have to go through with it. All in all, it was a $40K, very nice party, and I left him 2 months later. As for the reasoning, I had outgrown him more or less. The relationship should have ended around the time we became engaged. We weren't aligned in regards to ambitions and long-term expectations. I wanted a lifestyle that he would have never been able to provide or even accompany. I wanted a partner who I could feel admiration and respect for, in addition to love. I just did not feel that for him, and I knew that I never would. The breakup was not peaceful. He would not accept that it was over, and his refusal to respect my wishes caused me to absolutely revile him. He made the divorce process as unpleasant as possible, and I lost a lot of friends, but it was 400% worth it. And now, nearly 9 years have passed, and I'm engaged to a man who is everything I have ever wanted. Last I heard, my ex still claims that I ruined his life and squawks tales of my horridness to anyone who will listen. Go figure. Edit. To those who feel inclined to criticize me for having had the audacity to leave a man I no longer loved and who I desired no future with, please humor me by detailing how you feel the situation could have been better handled. I can only assume that some of you can offer less horrific solutions than the one that I opted for. Story number 24. I was a pharma sales rep and we hired a new guy, Mr. Super Sexy. He was a bold-faced, pathological liar from the get-go and was used to getting his way because he was so good-looking. I did not have to go work with him directly as we each had a different portfolio of products, but I went to the same offices as he did, and every office staff raved about this guy. At first, at a regional sales meeting, he met a very nice woman from a very rich family and they started to date. I did not pay any attention until one day I was in an office way out in the high desert of California and I was quizzed about this guy by the older ladies on staff. Who was he? Where did he come from? Is he married or involved with anyone? It had been 6 months with this guy, but I honestly did not know. So later I asked one of my coworkers and learned he was married to the rep he met at the sales meeting. They had eloped in Vegas and her parents gave them a house and a Porsche. I also learned that he was getting it on the side from about 5 different women in different offices. And the older ladies in the one office that asked about him could not believe this super sexy guy from LA was truly unattached and looking for love in the Mojave Desert. I did not have the heart to call the wife as we barely knew each other. I decided to let it all come out on its own, which it finally did, and what a horrible mess. He got the Porsche after giving her VD, I think on their first anniversary, which is how she found out, and it was just so sad. She fell. Hook, line, and sinker. Luckily, her parents were able to bail her out, but it was messy. Story number 25. Not my story, but it's my grandma's, but the craziest story I have ever heard in my life. He tried to end her life on their honeymoon. It all started when she was a sophomore in high school. She went on her first date. He was a senior, and he drove her to a lookout spot and SA'd her. She lost her virginity, got SA'd, and became pregnant all in one fatal swoop. Well, back in that time, in my culture, the thing to do was to relocate and get married, so she moved halfway across the country and married my grandpa. She had my mom at 16. He was abusive, so she left shortly after. She proceeded to live a pretty good life as a single mom. She was a model and traveled the world with some pretty famous people before she became religious and changed her luxury globe-trotting lifestyle. You might be wondering by now, why haven't I mentioned the unaliving attempt at the honeymoon part? Because that's not when it happened. Almost 20 years later after she left him, she ran into him at a wedding. She said he was so charming, and it seemed like he had changed, and he was doing everything to have her back after all the years, blah, 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 blah. Well, she fell for his charm, and they had a small wedding shortly after. After the wedding, he seemed to be in a bad mood. By the time they got on the flight, my grandma asked him why on earth he was in such a bad mood on their wedding night. Well, I kid you not, I can't make this up. He legit turns to her and says, "I only married you so I can end your life." And she was like, "What the hell?" Not another word was spoken the whole flight, and she kind of brushed it off, and they got to the hotel room about 8 hours later. Well, he wasn't joking, folks. He took a large metal object and proceeded to beat her on the head and left her for dead. She miraculously survived, and needless to say, they again broke up. And this is why I believe my grandma's story. I eventually met my grandpa once when I was in high school. He had a wife of 20 years and a daughter a couple of years older than me. He seemed totally normal from the outside, but I believed my grandma for a few reasons. 1. My grandma is very religious and all about telling the truth and just very innocent in that way. 2. He completely disowned my mom, never acknowledged her existence. She would try to reach out and he would straight up say not to contact her except when his wife insisted on meeting us because they are normal, nice people. And 3. My grandma never told me that story until after I met him. I knew nothing about him when I met him except that he didn't really like to talk to my mom. Well, you know when someone gives you that feeling in your gut, like they are evil or psychotic when you have nothing to base it on except the feeling of your stomach literally turning over? Well, that happened. And I always thought it was more like I was feeling off that day, but hell no. After my grandma told me that story years later, I finally knew why I always thought something was wrong with him. Story number 26. I don't have a story about divorce at all, but I just wanted to submit something for people who are thinking about getting married. Marriage is an institution that was created by the church, and churches everywhere offer classes for couples that are thinking of getting married. I know you might not be religious, but I know that my marriage is going steady, strong, and stable because of the class I took. It helped me think hard about things you don't necessarily think about before marriage. The class I took addressed the myths of marriage, and it taught me so much. For instance, your spouse will not complete you. They're another human, and if you base your life off of someone else as being the source of your happiness, it will only let you down. You have to be your own person before you're comfortable with another person, etc. It really, really helped me and my wife. Overall, I'd highly recommend looking into it if you're thinking of getting married. Story number 27. My first marriage lasted 10 months. She was insanely jealous and untrusting with no reason. I stupidly dumped all female friends to make her happy. If we passed another female in public, she was looking at me, making sure I wasn't looking at this female that she perceived as a threat. She also accused me of cheating on her, never with proof. She also had zero empathy. We were in New York City on December 1st. The city was still in deep mourning and recovery from 9/11. And at one point, she said in public, "I don't give an F about 9/11. They were just towers." I was miserable, but I tried to make it work. One day I was pissing and it burned bad. Got tested, test was positive. I was 100% faithful. She wanted a divorce and spread a lie to all who would listen that I cheated on her. It destroyed my reputation. I learned many lessons and grew up over that dumpster fire of a marriage. But that was then. I've been happily married 16 years now to the perfect person for me. Story number 28. It was a smidge over a year, so maybe it doesn't count. We had been dating for about 5 years when we got married, had moved states together, bought a house together, said I love you a lot, had really nauseating pet names for each other. That was it, you know? And then one night we were watching some cop drama where the middle-aged cop is dating, i.e. very casually sleeping with, a Russian lady who is basically a grifter, one step up from a prostitute. And then she proposes marriage one night, and he's shocked. And she says basically, "But this is the best we can expect. We're both older and not very desirable, and we get along okay, and that's enough for me." And he's very much not in agreement. In protests, that's not enough for him. But as she was finalizing her argument, my ex sighs and says, "That is so true." And I ask him, "What? What's true?" And he says, "A love match is unrealistic. Like us, you just find someone you can tolerate and you make it work." Excuse me? Tolerate? Make it work, I say? All the times you said you love me, you were lying? Well, yeah. I mean, I thought you knew. No, I did not know. So, fellow viewers, how often do you listen to these videos and think to yourself, man, I really want to slap or strangle one of the people in these stories? Because this is one of those instances. Oh my God. But babe, I thought you knew. Do you know how long it takes for me to slash your tires? Because we're about to find out. I'm just saying, because if you string me along like that, I will cry and then I'll probably have an outburst. I'm just saying, like, that is insane to hear from somebody that you thought you loved. I feel so bad for OP, and I hope that her husband went missing under mysterious circumstances. That's a joke. I cannot stress how much that is a joke. Anyway, next story. Story number 29. My story is different from the others here. This is hard to think about clearly or explain, but I'll try. Still not sure if I'm the bad guy or not. My ex and I broke up because I was grieving my mom and probably was a wreck to be around. I moved into an apartment and lived on my own for a year, and my psychiatrist prescribed me a huge amount of Xanax, 9 milligrams a day, which I took as prescribed. I was a literal zombie. I somehow made it through the year of that apartment lease alive and paid my bills on time, but then my dad started struggling with alcoholism while grieving my mom, and I realized it was time to move home to a city about 1 hour away. When I made that decision, I met this guy, who I will call Sid. Sid wasn't attractive to me physically, but he treated me with an unfamiliar level of kindness. I kept feeling like I needed to pay back his favors, and that got me to the point where I felt guilted into becoming his girlfriend. I learned how to pretend to be attracted and just kind of deal, and I went to my best friend to explain that I didn't feel much towards him, and she told me to give the nice guy a damn chance for once, and that my inability to accept a kind person was why I kept ending up in dead-end relationships. So I continued to take the medication, which I had to buy a lockbox for because he was a recovered heroin addict who used methadone daily. Sid warned me he may want to take my meds. The point where I stuck to him was when I met his mom, who was similar to mine, who had passed. I kind of stayed in the relationship so I could have a mom. He helped me move my stuff and then asked me to marry him. I blankly, numbly said yes. I was excited to have a mom again. We had been dating for about 5 months. I moved back to my old town and rented a house with him and weaned off the medication because I felt so dull. I started to realize that I had made a huge mistake and caught him shooting up. Some more lies came to the surface too. We started fighting. He was pretty aggressive and I was afraid he would become violent, and I told him to get out. I was done. The marriage was over within 4 months. He stalked me for a while after, but that came to an end when he went to prison for stabbing someone. He's in there for 8 years. As for me, I recovered, stopped taking the medication, started therapy, blast forward to today, and I'm married with a toddler and a baby on the way. That life is unrecognizable to me now, and I'll never quite be able to tell the whole story without feeling some guilt and also going off in about 10 different directions. I wanted a mom. I was numb with depression and over-medicated. I ignored red flags. It was a whole thing. Story number 30. He changed the day after we married. His idea of what a wife's duty was didn't exactly fit with mine. He expected me to cook, clean, and pick up after him, as well as working a full-time job. I earned a good wage working in a factory, and before we married, I supported him financially through college, on the understanding that once he got a job, he would support me through nursing school. However, when he got a really good job, earning more than twice what I earned, but said he couldn't understand why I would give up a perfectly good job and refused to support my nursing ambition. He refused to share his earnings, insisting that all bills, including his gym membership and bodybuilding supplies, were split between us. Then, what I had left out of my wage, zero, I could keep, and what he had left out of his, he could keep for himself. To top it all off, I also couldn't refuse to have sex with him, wherever, whenever, and however he wanted, or so he thought. Needless to say, we argued a lot. 3 months into the nightmare marriage, he stayed out all night, and when he came home, he told me that he had been with a girl he'd picked up at a bar the night before. He tried to use it to teach me a lesson, saying if I was going to be difficult, he would get his fun elsewhere. I kicked him out and divorced his sorry ass. Best decision of my life. Story number 31. When he laid his hands on me. I stayed though. Then I got pregnant and he decided he didn't want me pregnant anymore. He tried to kick the baby out of me. That was the first time I fought back, and I walked out that night. He continued to try and get me alone and lay hands on me though. The marriage lasted less than a year, but I couldn't get my divorce until after my son was born. My divorce was finalized 14 days after his birth, and after he was born, I decided to go back to school. Well, he was waiting for me one day outside and pinned me to my car and started punching me. I went to school with a third-degree black belt, and other students screamed at him after they came out and saw the attack. He chased him off and then pulled some strings at the school. It now became mandatory for us to take self-defense to graduate. Don, the black belt, taught the class. Then, 6 weeks after we started, my ex cornered me at my mom's house. He pushed me down the hall and tried to get me into the back bedroom. I knew he was going to end my life if he got me in there. Thankfully, the door was closed. When my back hit that door, it triggered a level of rage I had not felt before or since. I don't even remember what I did to him. Next thing I know is the cops are there and trying to arrest me for assault. I beat his ass. Thankfully, they took him away in cuffs instead. Something to do with the OFP I had against him and the bruises on my chest from him pushing me down the hall. Don also taught the PD self-defense on the side, and one of the officers told him, so he was waiting to give me a big hug the next day at school. That was the last time that man ever laid hands on me. I hope he has had a horrible and miserable life. He was banned from my son, so no more contact after he turned 5. My son will be 25 next month. Story number 32. I think I knew when we were sitting at the courthouse waiting to be seen. I kept hoping my friend, who was my witness, would stop it from happening, but she just watched the train wreck happen. We lived in a state where if one person wanted a divorce but the other didn't, it was really hard to get a divorce. Maybe a month into the marriage, he started berating me for my clothes being too tight because when we went out, people checked me out, and somehow that was my fault. When we fought, he would leave and turn off his phone, heavily implying he was going to some girl's house to sleep with them. He would then come back at around 3 in the morning drunk after gambling a bunch. I told him I wanted a divorce, and he said, "Good for you, I don't," and that was the end of that. By 5 months, I just wanted to end my life because I couldn't fathom growing old with him. He would always quote scriptures at me to prove what a bad wife I was. He blew up at me when he discovered I was still on my birth control. He started throwing mine out and trying actively to knock me up, but I didn't want kids yet, especially not with him. About 8 months in, I was pregnant and we got into a fight. He pushed me into a rocking chair and then left to do his cheating, gambling, drinking thing with me passed out on the floor because I had hit my head. I woke up and there was a lot of blood. My landlord took me to the hospital, and since my husband's phone was off, he didn't come until about 9 in the morning the following day. He first yelled at me for not being home when he got home. Then he yelled at me for being careless enough to lose his baby. I eventually called my dad for help when he was at work, and my dad flew out there to get me and move me out of state, and my ex harassed me for months after that. Eventually, my dad and I went back with the police officer to mediate, plus our landlord's husband, and 2 moving guys to get all of my stuff. Story number 33. My marriage lasted just over a year. 4 months after our 1-year anniversary, he decided to curse me out over getting the last piece of cake that I made for his mom's birthday. 1, he did not like cake that much. He told me that throughout the whole time we were dating, and even cursed his mom out for getting him one for his birthday one year. 2, the cake was sitting there for almost 2 weeks. He had not touched it at all before then, when there was more cake to be had. And 3, I'm not a breakfast person normally. Also, I take medicine that I have to take on an empty stomach in the morning since I don't really like breakfast anyway. However, I can eat 30 minutes to an hour after taking my morning meds. I was leaving for a job interview, so I would have to take the bus and decided to eat the last piece since I didn't think he would mind. So, because he made me late for my interview by cursing me out over some effing cake, I ended up packing all of my crap and leaving that day. Now, I have a man that treats me like a queen and makes me feel special every day for the past 2.5 years. Best decision of my life. Story number 34. Not me, but about a wedding I was invited to. I knew the bride, and I'll start this off by saying she has always been an extremely entitled, mean girl, wannabe model influencer. Get ready and buckle up. The bride and groom's entire relationship was a whirlwind. She met the guy at a job interview when he interviewed her, disclosed he would be her boss, and then asked her out for drinks, which she accepted. They were engaged in 6 months and married 6 months later. He was financially very comfortable, but was cheap AF and wouldn't pay for the wedding. She had very big ideas of what kind of wedding she wanted, down to very specific details. And it landed on renting a Z-list celebrities international beach house and having a bikini reception while wearing a custom thong in front of grandparents and every single coworker. Her parents paid for every detail of the wedding, which quickly went from being a $40K affair to over $100,000. Parents had to get a second mortgage to help pay for the wedding and put themselves into a crappy financial situation. But hey, what baby wants, baby gets. In lieu of traditional wedding gifts, the bride and groom set up 2 specific crowdfunding websites. One asking for down payment help for their first home, and the other paying for every single element of their 2-week South Pacific honeymoon. They were very specific to anyone sent an announcement. If you weren't contributing to one of their websites, they wanted cash. Don't even think about sending a blender. So comes the destination wedding day. Really, it was a full week, with over 150 family, friends, colleagues flying in from all over the country and internationally. It was clear the wedding was an enormous setup for Instagram content, and there was little to no inclusion of any family or friends. The bride openly mentioned that guests who didn't fit her aesthetic weren't going to be photographed. There were more photos of her in her custom thong than with her groom, parents, or grandparents. It was just so trashy and embarrassing. Then cut to their insane 2-week honeymoon in the South Pacific. Everything was paid for by the generosity of family and friends. Daily, we Instagram followers were graced with photos of her bare ass on the beach, but no photos, or seriously cropped photos, of hubby. It was odd. Cut to a week later, after the honeymoon, they had a solid home down payment from their other website and started looking at real estate. They find a home they like and use said money to put down. 1 week later, we're at basically a month post-wedding, the bride goes missing. Yes, missing. The groom shows up acting all sorts of bizarre and hysteric to in-laws, saying he actually does know where she is and that she went to visit a friend from the internet. And I know it's a man, but I trust her. Well, she stays with random internet dude for a few weeks, charging everything to her husband's credit card, and 3 weeks later, they file an annulment. The bride is engaged at annulment to random internet dude, who we find out was a follower from Instagram and also who all the thong photos were for. She then discloses later on, when questioned by her family, why the hell she didn't call it off if she knew she wasn't in love with groom 1. And she says that she, 1, just didn't find him that attractive anymore, and 2, knew all the photos she'd take at the wedding and honeymoon would be good for her Instagram and potential modeling portfolio. Gross, 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 and gross. Guys, I am somehow speechless and also want to vomit, okay? I've read a few stories about these Instagram super content creator freakazoids who are a parody of themselves, but this might take the cake. This is S-tier insanity, so much so that I kind of hope that it's fake, but some people are so delulu that you could hit them with the reality bus and they wouldn't even know where they are. That analogy doesn't make any sense. Don't try to decipher it, and don't try to decipher these mentally ill people unless you have 10 years of therapy experience under your belt, because you will go insane probably trying to see the world from their eyes, because it sounds disgusting. They see the world through VR lenses and filters and vomit and piss. I don't know. Next story. Story number 35. I met a woman. I had never, ever felt for him the way I felt for her. I was sick, like literally heartsick and physically in pain. It was the most horrible and wonderful thing to happen in my life. I should have never married him, but I didn't know. I didn't know what love and sex and passion and partnership was truly supposed to feel like. A warning for other women: don't complain about your husband constantly. You're teaching younger women that husbands are buffoons and to dislike them is normal. It isn't normal to not like your partner. It isn't normal to not really enjoy sex with them. It's not normal to not want to go home. True loving partnership is not like that. Story number 36. I started having cold feet about 2 weeks before the wedding. Found out a week before the wedding I was pregnant and took it as a sign that it was meant to be. As soon as the wedding band was on my finger, he did a 180 and basically made my life a living hell the entire time I was pregnant. He was verbally, emotionally, and financially abusive. He hit me once, but said it was an accident. The baby was born, and he got worse. Drank nonstop, wouldn't work, effed everything with a pulse in town. At one point, he smashed the windows out of my car with his steel-toed boots, threatened to bury a hammer in my father's skull, said he would go to the woods with my dog and kill them both, and threatened to burn down the neighborhood just to get to me. I suppose it was over a year that we were married, but factoring in restraining orders and his inability to be a decent husband or father, and him living away from us, it was basically over before it got off the ground. He left the province a week after our kid's first birthday and continued to F with my life while doing everything in his power to not be held accountable for support. He didn't even bother to respond to the paperwork for our custody hearing and went underground to avoid child support. After we were legally separated for over 5 years, he then claimed me and my son as dependents on his taxes. What an effing nightmare. I had to prove to CRA that I had sole custody the entire time, never saw a penny of support from him, paid for everything myself, and had subsidies for daycare. Neighbors, the daycare owner, and members of my family all had to write letters verifying what the truth was. In the meantime, I was left without GST, child benefit, or an income tax return because CRA held the payments until it was proven that I wasn't defrauding them. The real kicker was that CRA knew his address and wouldn't provide us with it because maintenance enforcement and CRA do not share information. 15 years later, and as recently as November, he sent me a Facebook message saying, "What a hoe." The one before that, he called me a goat effing savage. Sounds like a man that really wants to be a positive role model, huh? But the joke's on him, though, because my kid is effing awesome, and he has a real dad that loves him to the end of the earth. Sorry for the long blog, but let this be a lesson. No matter how effing in love you are, you do not know someone well enough to marry them after 5 months. I know. I cringe to the core when I think about it. Story number 37. She was good all the way through. Dating, engagement, everything. Looking back, there were a few red flags, but compared to my last few relationships, they didn't look so big. She had PTSD and was very bipolar, but hey, I'm borderline autistic and have a history of depression. As long as she was treating me well, I can handle the mental health struggles. Well, fast forward to the marriage, a year earlier than I was comfortable with, but I didn't have it in me to fight her. I'd just gotten out of a bad relationship, and a few months in, she's been the direct cause of me losing 3 jobs, which is a big problem for me. If you want to treat me bad, that's one thing, but my coworkers aren't dating you and shouldn't have to deal with your crap. But she made like $16 an hour, so our bills were paid, and I focused on self-improvement and keeping the house in good shape. Then she started having panic attacks every time I left the house. Not even joking. I didn't see much of my friends for months because I'd have to rush home to comfort her within 10 minutes of arriving literally every time. A multi-year weekly gathering of autistic dudes watching cartoons and eating food and enjoying life was completely killed by her. Okay, bad, but I grew up worse. We can work on this, right? Just gotta work on boundaries. So we set up a safe word for taking a breather if we think we are getting too worked up. I used it 3 times and she ignored it all 3 times. I've never been violent, but it runs in the family. Once I was taking a breather because for the first time in my life, I was legitimately worried I would lose control. This is because she spent our rent money on McDonald's while pretending to work and then tried to blame me because earlier that month I donated plasma to buy a book I wanted, and I told her I was getting too worked up and needed a moment to myself to calm down. It was the first time in my life I can remember being angry, and it scared me. And her response was to physically hold me in place so I couldn't leave. Well, later on, I finally get another job with a friend of hers who runs her own business as her personal assistant, which ended up amounting to me driving around helping various LGBT people with their lives, like rides, cleaning, emotional support, etc., and getting paid $50 an hour to do it. Getting paid to help people? I usually do that for free. Dream job. Well, about 48 hours into this job, I'm at home and she takes my phone out of my hand and accuses me of cheating on her. So I told her if she's so convinced I am, my phone is in her hand. Feel free to check it. I'm leaving to stay with a friend. At this moment, she knows she messed up bad. It takes a lot to make me give up on a relationship. So, like any logical adult, she screams, throws the phone at me, and proceeds to take her 5'1" frame and place it between me, 6'2", and the door. Now, I watched my parents regularly beat the heck out of each other and how that went. I've also seen her play the innocent card with the police and get her way before. I'm not touching her, not even a finger. I'm not stupid, and I'm actively non-violent. I don't even squish bugs. So I put it in very easy terms. I'm leaving, move. We live next door to the police station and I'll have them escort me out if I have to. Well, she called my bluff. I dial 911 and she snatches the phone before I can call, and in that instant leaves the door unguarded. I open it, she grabs me by the hair and then beats the absolute F out of me. I waited out because I've taken worse beatings and I'm not about to catch a charge over trying to get to safety. I get out and at this point I'm pretty sure it's over between us. But I'm taking a week to think it over. I leave the phone and go. I drive to where my boss is. We've become decent friends at this point, and she's at her side job. It's a drag bar. It's a labor of love. So I make my way to the bar, and I've never been in a bar before. Well, she meets me outside with clothes that aren't torn to shreds and takes me, blood, tears, and all, to sit with her in the light booth and watch my first ever drag show. Everyone fawns over me, and I end up on stage in a wig as one does. She has me turn off my location and change all my passwords. And she says, "You know, you're really bad at being an abuse victim." Well, wife loses her mind. And long story short, there was a self-unaliving attempt and she's impatient. Great. At least she's getting treatment because she's clearly not doing well. We've changed meds 9 times because they weren't working. We just have to try again, right? Eventually it will get better. Well, I come home, she gets out, and I'm still very guarded but willing to try. Work again. A friend came out to her parents and they disowned her. She's crying, I'm hugging, wife calls. I don't answer. I'm busy. She shouldn't have her cell phone anyway, and whatever it is, this is more important. I shoot her a text saying, "Hey, I'm working, it's urgent, I'll call you back in like 5 minutes." Absolute chaos. She calls me. She calls my boss. She calls my friends demanding they get me to respond to her. Well, I calm down the sobbing girl, call her back like I said I would. Turns out she finally discovered all my passwords had changed because she wanted to read all my messages again, and she demands I give her all of my passwords right now. That's not possible. I randomly generate them. I can't just spend the next hour listing them off. I'm being paid to do a job, and so is she, and this was holding both of us up. She already should have been fired 4 times over for missing work, but ADA covered it. She'd worked maybe 10 hours that month of her full-time job. The rest of the time, she just didn't really want to go to work today. Or better, she would leave in the morning, pretend to go to work, then sit in the parking lot for 9 hours, occasionally getting fast food until it was time to go home. We got evicted 3 times over this. When we go home, I'd be happy to give them to her, but she is not going to demand them from me, especially not over the phone. Now I have work to do. I've got to go. I get a text from her saying, "I can't do this anymore. Quit your job. I don't trust the people you work with. They're putting bad ideas in your head." Well, that was a mistake. I shot a text back saying, "I don't want this to work more than I want to not be in a toxic relationship. We're done." And of course, she told everyone I was so terrible for breaking up with her over text, but always leaves out how she had physically attacked me the last few times I'd seen her in person. In public, no less. I had witnesses. The longer I've been away from her, the more of her lies I've discovered. She cheated on me regularly, had the guy I was supposed to not worry about in our marriage bed within 4 hours of us breaking up. He lived 2 hours away, and my favorite one, apparently I was with her for 2 years total and never knew she smoked cigarettes. Why would you even hide that? She apparently smoked like a chimney around all of her friends, but never told me. She also has told all of her friends and mine that I was abusive, manipulative, and that I was a predator. I've been openly asexual for years. I literally could never have sex again and be fine. It took 3 days of us working together, and the more we spoke, the more we Spider-Man pointed at each other about the wife and her manipulation. Apparently, she had been playing everyone against everyone for her own benefit, and as soon as we were actually able/allowed to speak to each other, everyone in her life basically simultaneously went, "Hey, that was all lies. You're actually a good person." Well, fast forward months later, and I've graduated from assistant to business partner, own a house, and sent the positive pregnancy test in the mail with the divorce papers. Turns out, I'm not asexual. I'm just not attracted to people who abuse me. And also, I have a type. Yikes. But only after I dragged my feet so long she had to miss her divorce cruise because her passport was in her maiden name and she couldn't get it changed back fast enough. F you, Kelly. You shouldn't be taking a cruise at the height of COVID anyway. Ironically, she used to brag about how she was big in the LGBT community, and now the local community hates her. Meanwhile, when she met me, I was telling people I was an LDS conservative, but absolutely not a Republican, F Trump, and I now also work at the gay bar on the side, and I am practicing my first drag performance with help from my new partner. I've opened up and become more social, my depression completely disappeared, and I'm doing better than ever. On the good side, I have a partner now who isn't perfect, but is constantly improving. I know how to set and keep boundaries now. I didn't get a disease and refused to go get her pregnant within a year of knowing her. So, all in all, I walked away better off. Mental illness is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Don't use it as an excuse to be an abuser. And don't excuse abuse because the source is mentally ill. Set boundaries and keep them. So, that was definitely a roller coaster and a much longer story. Usually the ones that really sparked are like this length, so I'm kind of used to that, but really long comment because we're reading comments. But also the advice that OP provided at the end I think is really good. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot of stories where probably maybe some people could have used that advice at the end there. One thing though that didn't add up to me was when she beat the ever-living hell out of him and grabbed his hair. He said he left the phone, then went to the bar, and then the lady, the employer, was like, turn off your location, change your passwords. Maybe she meant in the future when he has his phone again, but the way I read it felt like she was talking about doing it in the moment. But, that's just one little thing. Overall, it's a fine story. It's not fine what happened, but ultimately OP wised up, got rid of the problem, and seems to be in a much better place. So good for OP. Anyway, next story. Story number 38. Not me, but someone else. A few years ago, my spouse and I took a cruise. Big deal for us because it was our first vacation leaving the kids with their grandparents. Anyway, there was this mid-20s looking couple we noticed a few days in. The guy had a cast on his leg, and she was pushing him in a wheelchair. At first, we thought nothing of it beyond, well, that stinks, right? To have a broken leg on your vacation? Well, then we found out that the story of this couple had gone all around the ship like a wildfire. Apparently, they were on their honeymoon, and the very first stop, the Bahamas I think it was, and they went to a beach, and the guy got really drunk. He climbed up this rock face, fell off, and broke his leg like a drunken dummy does. And to boot, it was apparently a bad break that they didn't have the money for the local ER to set properly. I'm probably mangling that detail a bit. So they elected to get a cast and finish the cruise knowing he would need to have it reset when they got back to the States. We saw this couple several more times over the week, the girl always pushing him in his chair, and you could see both of their faces getting progressively more pissed off at each other each day. Like, they would come to the pool deck and sit there grumpily staring at the water. Always wondered what happened to that couple. Story number 39. I realized it was a mistake after I was away for a month for work and was happier than I ever was at home. When I got back, we just fought the whole time until we separated 2 weeks later. We were married for 6 months. She was really easily influenced by her mom, and so every time she would want to break it off with me, her mom would convince her not to. So she was in a relationship with a man that she didn't like it all that much and made her unhappy. I wanted to go to marriage counseling, but she wasn't willing to do that with me. So I said we need to get divorced if we can't resolve our differences, and she moved out immediately. Her parents lived like 10 minutes away. It sucks because she was one of my best friends, and I really wanted her to be happy. I just wasn't the guy for that. I ended up sacrificing a lot of my life trying to make it work. The day after we separated, she went to dinner with an old family friend who she actually wanted to be with, and shortly after we got divorced, they got engaged. It's been 2 years and I'm a lot better now. Story number 40. My ex-best friend married an a-hole after just 2 weeks of dating. Although we had all gone to the same high school and were distant acquaintances, she lied to me and her other best friend, inviting us to a 4th of July barbecue when she really wanted us to come to Reno with her to watch her get hitched. She told none of her family or friends before she did it, but then came home in tears and told me how much she regretted her family not being there. So I got roped into being a bridesmaid at a fake wedding to cover up the real elopement. She ended up at my house 2 weeks later sobbing, telling me that her husband had strangled her and he was hitting her. I hid her for 2 days while her husband sent me absolutely vitriolic messages, telling me that he would end my life if he found out I was hiding her. I want to call the police. My friend wants to go back to him. She goes back to him and I don't hear from her for 6 months. Then the next communication I get from her is a picture of an ultrasound. She refuses to text back or pick up the phone. Next communication after that is a phone call 9 months later asking if I would watch her kid. I agreed, but told her we need to talk first. Well, during that talk, she tells me that she stopped talking to me because I'm liberal. We had been friends for 10 years before this, and my beliefs have never been a problem before, and that the husband hated me for it. He also still hated me for sheltering her after the wedding. When she told me that he was doing drugs and had lost his trucking job too, I told her she needs to protect herself and her baby and get out. But the friendship ended because she told me, "My husband was right about you. You don't understand anything. You're not a true friend to me, and you never have been." So I said okay, and I left. She's tried many times to reconnect, but I'm done. Last I heard, she had another kid with him. He became more abusive and more strung out on meth, and eventually she left him. Maybe 2 years after the fake wedding, she's remarried now to a guy that looks like he's on meth, but go off, I guess. Story number 41. Well, we never actually made it to the marriage part, but with my now ex-girlfriend, we went from a 7-year dating relationship and living together to her asking me to marry her on a beach in Mexico to me kicking her out of our apartment in 6 weeks. She asked, I said yes. We got back and 2 days later, she started hanging out with the roommate of her best friend. A week in, she was asking to crash at their apartment. A week later, she had stayed there 3 out of 7 nights that week, and I was asking what's up, and she told me about him for the first time. I didn't know her friend had a roommate until now, and she told me that weekend, and 2 more nights crashing there at this point, so I'm getting suspicious, and she asked if she could invite both the friend and roommate over for dinner and games. I said sure, but I finally met him now 4 weeks in. We had a decent night hanging out, although at this point now that I've seen them together, I can tell something's up. After that night, I don't see or hear from her for 5 days straight. I finally call her and tell her she needs to come home so we can talk about what's going on. She puts it off for another 2 days. Finally comes home and I ask her point blank, "Are you cheating on me?" She tells me she has feelings for him and has made out with him a few times but has not slept with him. I don't believe it, but I ask her if she loves him and she says, "I don't know." So I asked her if she would not stay there or see him until she's figured it out. She agrees, and 2 days later, she asks to stay at a different friend's place after her work shift. I know what's up, and I tell her, sure, if that's what you want. I don't hear from her again until that weekend, and she shows up at our apartment that weekend, and I tell her to tell me the truth. Well, she tells me that she thinks she's falling for him. So I tell her we're done, and I don't want her at our apartment again until she's ready to pick up her stuff. Also, as a bonus, during the breakup, she said she thinks she's poly and wants to see other guys. I told her I wasn't opposed to it. I've done the poly thing before, but that it means I can see other women as well. She said she couldn't deal with me seeing other women, and she just wants to be able to see other men. Nope, of course, did not fly. 4 weeks after we broke up, I got a call at 3 a.m. begging for me to come pick her up. They had an open relationship, and she slept with a guy in a bathroom at the bar that they were at the night before. So she slept with one of his coworkers that day, and she flipped out at him and threw a plate at him, and he smacked her. I showed up and drove her to a friend's house, but I knew there was no repairing the relationship after that. And that's how my 7-year relationship went from getting married to single and completely over it in 2 months. Story number 42. This might not be that relevant to the question, but my mom is currently wanting a divorce after 4 years of marriage due to my stepdad's overuse of drugs and alcohol and the way he treats my mom and us kids. They were always on and off again for the same reason each time, and each time he promised to change and apologized with flowers and chocolates. Then, a week later, it was back to the same old behavior. Drink driving home from work, going to the pub and doing coke, then coming home and taking his anger out on us. My mom said this time is final, but I feel like they will get back together. It's been hard as while he is gone, we don't have a good source of income, and all of our stuff is suddenly breaking, like our washing machine and our Wi-Fi box, and our bathroom taps don't work, so we have to fill the bathtub buckets from the kitchen. I finally broke down last night and cried for a good hour. Hopefully by staying positive, things will get better. Thank you for reading, you beautiful human beings. Story number 43. My first marriage lasted a little over 2 years, but I'm posting because I knew it was a mistake during our honeymoon. We went on a cruise, and during said cruise, we met another couple the first day that we liked, so we hung out with them a bit, had drinks, etc. I ended up getting very hurt and upset because he kept wanting to hang out with this couple and get drunk rather than spend time alone one-on-one with me. I brought lingerie that I didn't even wear because he literally would just get drunk hanging out with this random couple and then just want to go to sleep. Our relationship progressed too fast before that, and I was also pretty down on myself and basically latched onto him just because he actually wanted to marry me, and he wasn't a religious conservative like most men in rural Alabama. I completely disregarded many issues, red flags, incompatibilities because of that. Things were okay for about a year after the honeymoon, but that always stayed in the back of my mind. Our relationship completely deteriorated after we both went through some pretty significant hardships. Deaths in the family, job loss, etc. I gained a ton of weight and he started smoking weed from the moment he woke up to the moment he went to bed. I left in 2013 and leaving was the best thing I ever did. I went back to school, lost over 150 pounds, and married the actual love of my life last year. When you get that bad feeling in the pit of your stomach, do not ignore it. Story number 44. Obligatory, not me, but a friend. They got married after dating for a little over a year. She just finished nursing school and he was still in school and working part-time. They ended up buying a house shortly after the marriage, in her name since he wasn't working full-time yet, and she was also paying the majority of the bills as well. One day, she called his school for reasons I can't remember, and they told him he was not enrolled. Turns out, he never was. To keep up the lie, he would literally leave the house every morning as if he was going to class and do pretty much whatever. She also eventually found out he wasn't working when it came to tax season as well. On top of all of that, he was likely cheating as well. She kicked him out and eventually got the marriage annulled. And here's the kicker. During the annulment process, his mom, who he moved back in with, told her she needs to remember her marriage vows and they need to work things out. Guess mom didn't want him living with her and mooching off of her too. Story number 45. We didn't make it a year. I knew as soon as he proposed it wasn't right. We lived together and I had been looking at apartments so I could move out on June 30th. He proposed June 10th, and I knew if I said no, he would leave me stranded at his lake house 3.5 hours away from where we lived. So I said yes. I tried to end the engagement a few weeks later, but he wouldn't accept it. And a week before the wedding, he told me I was no longer able to see my friends after we married. It felt like a punch to the gut. I spent the night before the wedding bawling to my best friend that I didn't want to go through with it, and she was really encouraging and told me to cancel, that we would just make it a giant party with my friends and family, but I couldn't do it. As I was about to walk down the aisle, I almost said something to my dad about calling it off, but he told me how proud and happy he was, and I couldn't do it. I went through with the wedding, and the pictures from that day are now hilarious, but I looked so effing miserable. I was so grossly unhappy and terrified, it's all over my face. About a month into our marriage, his controllingness just intensified. It was horrible. I went out to dinner with a girlfriend one night and I didn't get home until 9:30, the horror, and he freaked out and just started screaming at me. I went to bed and while I was sleeping, he called my dad and told him I'm an alcoholic. I struggle with drinking now, but at the time, I never drank. He used it as a manipulation tactic. My parents tried to force me into rehab, and I finally opened up to my mom about what my marriage was really like. A few months later, I moved out. I know people judge me for such a short marriage, but I just couldn't do it. Life is too short to be so miserable. Story number 46. People get married because they see people like me and my wife. Been married basically since the first date. Like two freaking magnets. She is, even now, just so effing hot, but also smart and considerate. A good person. I am completely average and she's just wow. Anyway, we dated for 2 weeks and then ran off to Vegas and got married. Didn't tell anyone. Were her parents pissed? Oh yeah. We kept asking each other as we drove from Phoenix to Vegas, is it the sex? We're not just getting married for sex, right? Not a chance. Sometimes a person meets their soulmate. If you're smart, you both grab on. We've been married for almost 35 years now, and she still impresses me with her charm and intellect. She also still makes me feel like a horny 16-year-old, but God, do I love that woman. She is my other half, but people see a relationship like ours and think that's how marriage is. What they don't see are the fights and the compromises and the personal life changes one makes because of the love you feel. You don't make changes to placate or make the other happy. You change because doing so makes you a better man. It is hard work. It is a lifelong commitment to doing that hard work with no clear payout. And I think maybe that's why people may sometimes marry. They don't understand the work you must be willing to put into the relationship. Story number 47. 1. We were staying back at our student crash house after our trailer trash honeymoon, and I woke up in the dark. She wasn't beside me, and I heard moaning noises in the living room. So there she was, bareback riding my old roommate, making guttural animal sounds like I never heard her make with me. Went back to the bedroom, got my clothes, wallet, and day pack, padded out to the truck, and drove away fast. She got in touch through my brother and said she would accept me back, but I'd have to be open to an open relationship, living as a threesome, and I'd have to work to support the three of us. This is your brain on drugs, fam. Then number 2, we were staying at my uncle's after our trailer trash honeymoon, and I woke up in the dark. She wasn't beside me, and I heard her voice. So I figured she was talking with my aunt-in-law and padded quietly into the kitchen. Nope, she's on the phone with her ex, saying that she still had to wait 6 months after we sign on a house mortgage before she can file for divorce for irreconcilable differences. Then we can be together in our own house, baby. Irk. Went back to the bedroom, got my clothes, wallet, and day pack, padded out to the truck, and drove away fast. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, ain't never gonna be fooled again. No how. So I'm glad that OP wised up pretty much immediately in both instances and was like, I'm done, I'm gone, I'm not gonna, make 10 Reddit updates about it or something like that or stay longer than I need to. But is there a possibility, just maybe, that OP just has really bad taste in women? Maybe he has a blind spot for women with ulterior motives who just want to cheat and finagle him out of all of his assets. Oh my goodness, twice in the middle of the night. If he has a third partner and she's not next to him when he wakes up one night, I feel like he might have a panic attack next time. Best of luck to that guy. Anyway, next story. Story number 48. The guy I dated before my husband got engaged to his now ex-wife a month after my husband and I did. I wished him congratulations on Facebook because we had ended things amicably several years before. He texted me saying, well, she wanted it and I didn't have a reason not to. Okay, it doesn't seem like a great reason, but hey, it's your life. A few months later, I wished him happy birthday on Facebook. He texted me again that his fiance was pissed and making him delete all of the women from his Facebook and phone. Big red flags. They got married 6 months later, and 6 months after the wedding, I got a text message saying, we could be friends again, I'm getting a divorce. Turns out she had been cheating on him the entire time during their relationship. All of the jealousy on her part, and she had been projecting. She had been sleeping with guys, and she only married him so her kid could have a dad. He, of course, divorced her. Story number 49. About 10 months in, when I had an allergic reaction that landed me in the hospital, she moved in with another guy who was just a friend. Never saw her again. She called once to ask for my social security number for her taxes. Last week, I found out she married that poor sucker too, less than a year since we split. Don't blame her. She had some serious issues from her childhood, and I wanted to believe that she was the good that I saw in her, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. She could never understand how the relationships that she cherished always seemed to turn ugly. I learned the hard way it's just as powerful to fall out of love as it is into it. In hindsight, if your partner picks a fight with you for not getting into enough fights, that's a sign it may not be for the best. Story number 50. My nephew was brain damaged in an accident and had anger issues as a result. He met a girl at the rehab center where he was being treated who was also brain damaged and also had anger issues. What could possibly go wrong? They quickly set up housekeeping, and just as quickly, the landlord threw them out for constantly loud fighting. During one of their breaks from fighting, they decided to get married and could not be dissuaded. The wedding ceremony went okay, but they had such a huge fight in the limo going to the reception that the driver stopped and refused to drive any further until they calmed down. For their honeymoon, they went to a honeymoon resort on a secluded island, and 2 days into it, the proprietor of the resort asked them to leave. Yes, again, for fighting. They refused to leave, and the bride threw a shrieking tantrum, and thus the police were called. They were cuffed and taken off the island. They managed to somehow stay together for 6 more months. One night, my phone rang, and it was my nephew calling me from a phone booth, and he announced that his wife was trying to end his life. At that moment, there was a loud crash as she tried to demolish the phone booth by ramming it with their car. Fortunately, there were cement posts protecting the phone booth. I called the police, and they arrested her. Her parents wouldn't bail her out, but at her hearing, the judge was going to release her on PR, but for some reason, she got pissed off at the judge and started cursing him out, so she went back to jail. His parents managed to get him into a mental health facility, and a divorce was somehow accomplished. Story number 51. My first marriage lasted 6 weeks. After the honeymoon, she started to get our place ready for her mother to move in, and her mother hated me because I was not of her race. She assured me things would be different once we got married and we would start our own lives, but I soon started to figure out that she just desperately wanted to get married, and I happened to be the sucker that asked and went through. The first time I told her I think we had made a mistake, she flipped out, took a bottle of pills, and called 911. I made an effort after that to try my hardest, but in the end, we simply wanted different things. It made it even harder that she was super hot, really sweet when she wanted to be, and before we got married, an absolute joy to be around. And as soon as she got the ring on her finger, she changed for the worst. Coming up to my work and berating women I would have to talk to, screaming at them, "He's a married man and not to you." But I just cough it up too. Everyone makes mistakes in life, and thinking that you're in love with someone who is the last person you'll ever say I love you to is one of them. Story number 52. Not me, but a friend. He and his girlfriend dated for a few years when he proposed. And just a side detail, when they met, she was on the heavy side. She knew this, joined a gym, and worked her ass off to lose weight. She lost a ton of weight. I forget how much, but we're talking 100 plus pounds. But she's feeling more confident and looks great. I had just started a new job and was on probation, so I couldn't take the day off, a weekday, to attend the wedding, so I didn't go. The ceremony was very intimate. I didn't think anything of it. Now, he has a niche job where his schedule changes every 6 months. For example, he may work 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. and have Mondays and Tuesdays off, so we didn't see each other as much, but would run into each other around the neighborhood. So, I had both him and his wife on social media. She's doing a lot of working out and even trained for a 5K. She's looking great and feeling herself, so there were a lot of selfies at this point. Fast forward maybe 9 months after the wedding, I see a photo of her on Facebook in a bathroom with some guy I'd never seen with some caption like, "My bae." And I'm like, huh? I text my friend and he goes, well. And apparently shortly after they married, she decided she wanted to open the marriage. He said absolutely not. This is not what I signed up for. Turns out she asked this because she was already seeing a guy on the side, Mr. Bathroom Bae, and wanted to somehow legitimize it. He found out, they had words, and she moved out. She maintains that they had an open marriage to hide the fact that she cheated. They didn't make it a year before they separated and planned to divorce. I had an old Instagram account I rarely use that I forgot to block her from. A few months ago, I see she's not only still with the guy, but had a baby with him. This all happened in less than 2 years' time. Story number 53. Woke up the day after and got yelled at for something ludicrous. That was the start of it. Then about a week or two later, she chucked her ring at me for the first time. Then about a week later, so 2 to 3 weeks give or take after the wedding, she threw it again, then flipped out for about 2 hours while I stood there calmly listening, taking it knowing that I was done. After a solid 2+ hours, I walked away down our hall, punched and broke a window, which if you know me is so far out of character for me, for almost no one can believe I did it. But once I broke it, I immediately started cleaning it up because my reaction was broken glass plus dogs in the house equals injured dogs. But while I was cleaning, she called the cops and had me taken away as domestic/self-unaliving risks, even though she was the one throwing things at me and breaking crap all over the hallway of the house. But guess who got to spend the night at the hospital under self-unaliving watch? Better than jail, but the cops and EMTs were cool about it and let me choose hospital or jail, even though they should have taken her. Story number 54. A little out of scope, but here's my story. Got married to someone that I knew was toxic. I was a young, stupid sailor. She enjoyed telling stories from her past, but here's a fun one from when she was a college cheerleader. A younger JV cheerleader asked her for some advice one time, and her response was something along the lines of, "B-word, get away from me. There ain't no J in my V." And that comment is 100% indicative of the person she is. We were married for 6 years, but were together for less than 18 months. And oh yeah, that was also the time when she swung her purse at me and hit me in the face. After that, I was determined to never marry again. Then dated a woman for about 6 years, and we lived together for 3 years or so. She wanted to get married. I thought I would be able to convince myself while on deployment, so right before I left, I gave her the ring we picked out together, and I asked her. Fast forward about a month into the deployment, we pull into Italy for some major repairs. I took 9 days of leave, and she came to Napoli and we stayed at a friend's apartment. The first thing I tell her is I can't do the marriage thing again. As you can probably imagine, that went over like a lead balloon. The rest of the trip was pretty awkward to say the least. We didn't last more than a few weeks after that. Towards the end of that deployment, I reconnected with someone I went to high school with. We weren't really friends back then, but there were less than 50 kids in the entire high school, so we knew each other pretty well. We started talking mid-June, dating after I got home, August I think it was, and we married in October. This was almost 8 years ago, and she's the most amazing woman, and I've never been happier. Story number 55. Not me, but an acquaintance. He was an older guy, still working, who said he had no savings. Everything he says does have to be taken with a grain of salt, though. And he lives in Texas and meets an older woman online on a Jewish dating app. They decide to marry. Now all of her family, friends, and religious ties are back in a big city back on the east coast of the US. She apparently had a big apartment that she rented to a friend, keeping a lifeline, I guess, and he told her that he kept a kosher kitchen/household. That was a lie. She wasn't extremely strict in following the rules, but was far from kosher. She didn't find a large Jewish community in Texas like what he described and what she was used to. Frankly, Texas seemed pretty foreign to her, but she was willing to upend everything to be with him. One Monday morning, about 6 months into the marriage, she packed up and left. She went back home without saying goodbye to anyone. He came home from work, and she and her stuff were nowhere to be found. Now, she was an adult. Both had been married before, and I can only imagine that she had decided that was the best move for her. My problem was that he kept telling all these stories, some of which were pretty damning. She probably knew that she had a he said and he said situation, and a mutual friend confirmed my suspicions that he had lied to her. From what little I saw as an acquaintance, she tried it, gave it a go, didn't like it, and having the means to, just up and left. Story number 56. We had an almost 2-year-old son when we got married. My ex was an okay dad, not great, not awful. I wanted to start trying for a second one once we got married, and he begrudgingly agreed to try one time. Well, the one time worked, and my daughter was on her way. As soon as I told him I was pregnant, he started checking out of fatherhood. He would stay out all day and night with his friends, drinking and doing drugs. By the time I was ready to give birth, he was never home. When he was home, he was angry, high, drunk, aggressive, and violent. He would sleep in the living room, and my son was in my room with the door locked and a knife under my mattress just in case. When my labor began, he did not want to come to the hospital, but he did. He spent the entire time on his phone trying to find someone to bring weed to the hospital to make my labor more bearable for him. He left as soon as my daughter was born, wouldn't even hold her while I was being stitched. My whole family saw what an ass he was. I always covered for him so they wouldn't see what a mistake I made, but I can no longer hide it. Thankfully, my parents allowed me to move in with an infant and a toddler, and it's been 12 years, and he has maybe seen my kids 20 times in total. Story number 57. Not me, but a friend of mine. Marriage lasted less than a year. They both were religious, but she was also super sheltered. She was also quite a few years older than him. She was definitely pretty, but you could tell that she didn't really know much about how the world works. I guess to him she was cute, quirky. Anyways, wedding comes, and obviously there is the implication, sexy time. But apparently, I only know his side, she is completely oblivious to what happens on the wedding night. I only know bits and pieces of the story, but apparently he loves it. Duh, he's a dude in his 20s, and she hates it. According to him, she just wanted a partner or a buddy. She liked the idea of having a husband, but without the sexual intimacy. At the end of the day, he stuck it out for about a year. But finally, things broke down from there. Happily, he got remarried a little over a year later, and she moved back with her family and is content with her life, I guess. But the point is, talk about what you expect intimacy-wise early in your relationship. So, what are the chances he whipped it out and was like, oh my god, what's that thing? Because she's never seen one before. She's like 25 and she doesn't even know what that is. She's like, I thought all guys were smooth down there like Barbie or something. Oh, sheltered people, I love you, but I don't love you. Anyway, next story. Story number 58. My brother was married for 9-ish years, but it lasted less than 6 months. They were together for a few years before they got married, and he got into some trouble and was facing jail time. They got married after everything started before he went to jail. Married by the end of spring or early summer, and he went to jail in October. Less than a month later, she came to my work and introduced me to her new boyfriend. She never wrote him letters or went to visit him in jail, and was living halfway across the country when he got out. He paid for a divorce when she came to visit family, but she didn't do something on her end, and it was void. 5 years later, she calls up asking for him to pay again so she can get married to her boyfriend. And my brother told her to figure it out. I've already paid for it once. And they finally get the divorce finalized last year, and the day it happened, she changed her name back to our last name on Facebook, and within a week was broken up with her boyfriend, same one she tried to marry, and came back to our area. Her whole family can't stand her and is on my brother's side about it. Story number 59. So, I was dating this guy named Paul in my senior year of high school. He was a football player and all the girls liked him. I didn't really seem to care about it, but he asked me out on a date, and at the time he seemed like a nice guy, so I accepted. We started dating after that, and it wasn't a bad time dating. He proposed to me when I graduated, and I accepted. After that, I went to university and got a part-time job to save up for the wedding, while all he did was watch TV and stay at home. When we got married, he was not in the same high school, and he would always eat chips and watch TV like a kid. I wasn't making a lot of money, so I would always ask him to start working, but he would always take it as an insult. and I would be doing the same for 6 months. One day, we got evicted because I couldn't pay rent money, and he blamed me for it. He took all the money I was saving up and spent it on games and Netflix when I was saving up for a home. I got a divorce and got all the money back from him. Keep in mind, I was 18 when dating him, and it ended when I was 19. Story number 60. Not even joking, my ex-husband was my best friend from 6th form college. All had the same friends, etc. He joined the army, we started dating, I joined the RN and got married to each other on Christmas leave in my basic training of January 2012. I actually pushed the wedding back because I'd waited 3 years to get in and wasn't starting all over again because the dates clashed. Go on to my phase 2 training, and he gets deployed with his regiment to Canada in June 2012. Long story short, found many images of CP on his laptop, 635 to be exact, and trust me when I said it effed me up for a while seeing those horrific things. Didn't even deny it, just begged me not to go to the police. I was shell-shocked and ended up being so for another day or two before I spoke to 2 of my closest friends and colleagues, and they got the ball rolling. Then I got sent home on compassionate while they dealt with it. He gets arrested out there and sent back to the UK. I'm trying to deal with my whole life imploding and my trade training, while still trying to deal with a few other things that happened as well that I don't want to share. He pleads guilty, and due to being a first-time offender and a good character, he only gets 2 years conditional sentence and 5 years on the register. He doesn't even get dishonorably discharged because his regiment is very well known, think royalty, and he gets to leave instead. And I supported him through it all because I felt I owed it to him to get his counseling and crap sorted out, and then, after that, I put in a posting for elsewhere and I left him. This was a few months later by the time it's all been sorted. As for me, I ended up going off the deep end with suppressing all the effed up feelings I had and ended up having to have counseling and being on antidepressants because I believed that there must be something wrong with me for him to do what he did. And it didn't come out until my son from a later relationship and I developed postnatal depression. Meanwhile, I got left with all the bills, debt, severe confidence issues, and being labeled as an adulterer from all of our former friends. I say former because if they believed him, then I no longer wanted to waste my time on them. It effed me up for years, but I'm happily remarried and have an awesome little boy to boot. Yes, I still have problems from it all, but I'm in a much better place now. Story number 61. My wife's uncle was married twice. He's a big collector of Lionel trains. His first marriage ended after his wife confronted him about there not being enough money for baby formula and diapers because he was spending so much money on trains. They were together for 3 years. His second marriage lasted 20 years almost to the day. His obsession with Lionel trains resulted in him spending so much on them that despite making a high salary in specialty trade, his second wife's grocery store salary was their primary income. They lost 2 houses and several apartments during their marriage. His daughters started making bad decisions, feeling like nothing mattered since their father chose toys over them. By the time his second marriage ended, both children of that marriage had kids with the same drug dealer. His second wife, their 2 daughters, and their 3 kids from the same drug dealer were then evicted from their home after he walked out on them and used the money in their bank account for trains. Fast forward a few years later, he's living large in his apartment that is stuffed floor to ceiling with Lionel trains and cardboard boxes. He doesn't even have furniture. He has a bed and stacks of boxes. Story number 62. I can't speak for other countries, but it seems as time has passed in America, marriage has gotten awfully watered down. I know people in their 40s who got married after 3 weeks of dating. 3 weeks! And for both of them, it was their 3rd or 4th marriage. But this time, it was for real, and they finally found their true love. The union of bliss lasted another 9 weeks before imploding. Both parties have college degrees and are considered smart by their social group, and education does not equal intelligence. I wish more people would get this. People will tell themselves all kinds of dumb crap to be with someone. Many people cannot handle being alone or not in a marriage. They must feel like it gives them legitimacy somehow, but something is lacking in their lives to behave that way. And really, most people are full of crap most of the time. Be leery, do background checks, act like it's your life for F's sakes, not buying a new car. Story number 63. Not me, but my best friend. We've known this girl since high school, and I've always found her to be vile and manipulative, always fooling people into doing her bidding, dating people, then cheating on them. She was messed up, but when we graduated, we just parted ways, so I never gave it any thought past high school. Eventually, I just forgot about her. At some point about 2 years ago, my best friend and her reconnected and started dating. I hadn't seen her in years, so I decided to give her a chance thinking that maybe she had changed. I imagine my best friend felt the same way. I soon realized that she has not changed, and that she was just as manipulative, maybe even worse. But my best friend didn't see that. He insisted that she was different. I spent a good deal of their relationship trying to be happy for them, but I just couldn't. Being with her forced him into abandoning his family and friends. I was one of the last people that was still there for him. When they announced that they were getting married, I thought that on top of everything else, this was extremely soon. They had only been dating for no more than 4 months, way too early. But he insisted that they were made for each other. In his words, the female version of myself. Against everyone's wishes, including my own, they got married. I'm sure it sucked for my best friend because neither of his parents wanted to attend. Eventually, his mother agreed to it, but his father still refused. When the wedding happened, he never came. Their marriage lasted 1 month. Eventually, it came to my best friend that she had been cheating on him, and in fact had likely been cheating on him since before they were even married. It struck him hard. I hadn't spoken to him much since the wedding, but one night he came to my house and I could tell he had been crying a lot. He told me what happened and, well, I can't say I was surprised. I knew something like this was going to happen, but I guess I just wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. She was with my best friend after all, but I guess things never change. He's a lot better now, thankfully, and the divorce has been finalized and he's now dating someone new. I like this girl a lot more. Story number 64. I was married for 9 months. The first moment I knew something was wrong when we were on honeymoon. She said that she wanted to limit our sex during vacation. Came out of nowhere and seemed strange to me. Like, if there is ever a time to go at it like animals, surely it's in Hawaii, right? I thought maybe it was something else and kind of ignored it. Not going to lie though, it kind of ruined the honeymoon. That stuck in my head for a while, even when we got back. And she obviously began withdrawing from intimacy more and more while raising her demands and expressing more displeasure. She eventually started talking about divorce regularly. I don't really understand why she married me if she felt this way, and it seems really dishonest in hindsight. Within 8 months, she had emptied whatever accounts she had access to and concocted a story about physical and emotional abuse. Laid a groundwork with the cops by making a few false reports and started sharing these lies on social media to seize control of the narrative. It seems like a slow-motion downfall in hindsight, but to me at the time it felt like a blitzkrieg. I was in a constant state of confusion. The second time I realized that I had made a mistake was when she sat next to me one evening and told me she was going to make me cry. She went into a relentless speech about how little she thought of me, how I was less than a man, and she resented me for being a P-word. I was awful. She wasn't attracted to me. I meant nothing to her. I didn't say anything until she finished, so she started over again with the same speech. By the third time she said it, she finally got me to cry, and after that, she went back to our bedroom smiling. I still don't understand why she chose that moment to do that. It wasn't a continuation of some other argument, it just kind of happened. I also don't know why I forgave her all that time. I guess she was kind of right. So yeah, probably those 2 moments. Story number 65. I got married in January of 2019 and was separated from my now ex-wife by the same October. We'd been together almost 8 months, lived together for 5, and had known each other since school. First sign was that things weren't going well actually came about 5 months before the wedding, when she cheated on me. I was really hurt, but she apologized, and after a few concessions from her, I thought we moved past it. Second sign was when it happened again in the April after we were married. At this point, I lost all trust in her, but ultimately still loved her, so I stuck around. Over the next few months, the relationship broke down. I started checking her phone, we stopped having sex, barely spoke to each other. Eventually, she left me in October, and I was upset and tried to speak to her about it because I was scared of the change. But ultimately, it was over. Nothing I could do about it. Looking back, I wish I'd left after the first offense, and I'm angry at myself that I didn't leave after the second. It's been almost a year, and I'm still not completely over the whole thing. I've been to therapy, cut off all contact, and started a new chapter of my life. But every now and then, I catch myself replaying scenarios or wondering if I should message her. I guess this has been a half rant, half warning. I didn't realize how unhappy and toxic my relationship had become until after the fact. If you are unhappy in a relationship or problems have been making things difficult, take an objective look at that relationship. Talk to your partner about everything and do not be afraid to be the one to walk away if you have to. Story number 66. About a week after the honeymoon, loudly cussed me out in a movie theater over something asinine, me implying she missed a part of the movie where the character said something in what was an otherwise normal and pleasant conversation. It continued for the next couple of months with her feeling slighted at the most random and confusing things, leading to a range of subtle emotional abuse, like telling me I'd imagined her calling me names the day before, and all this led to other tirades and threats. I removed the 2 guns I had from the house after she started saying things like, "If you know what's good for you, you'll do X, Y, Z," and she found out the guns were gone and told me she wouldn't sleep in the same room with me unless I brought them back. She slept in a different room. That's when I truly realized I had made a mistake. I moved out the next morning while she was at work. This was also the time I realized that trusting American church culture to help me was a mistake, as all of this was described as normal. Relationships are hard, an opportunity to man up. She didn't do anything like this during dating. Granted, Granted, we didn't live together, but it was a flipped switch after getting married. I will say that I have come to be thankful for what I have learned and how I grew. I got married this month, 6 to 7 years later, to a fantastic person who I've been with for several years after taking several years to look back and see where I needed to grow and why I settled for less than loving treatment from someone else. So, mistake is a tough word. I wouldn't be who I am without the mistake. Story number 67. We dated for a year. I was still in the service but transitioning out, tied the knot right as I got out, and we moved back to my home state to live. 6 months in, we're in our own apartment with 2 dogs, things are okay. Christmas rolls around and she goes back home to visit with her family. I had not seen mine for enough time that I wanted to stay back. She decides she doesn't want to come back, and we begin the divorce. The divorce ends up taking 2 years too long, during which time she tried to reconcile what was left of our broken marriage during my time in the National Guard. I get a message on Messenger back while I still had my Facebook, and it's my soon-to-be ex-wife asking if we were sure we wanted this. I was doing my 2 weeks of training during this time, ultimately the worst time to be bugging me with this crap. I will admit, a part of me wanted to say no, wanted to stay married and try to make it work. Yeah, no. I eventually learned that that idiot was pregnant with another dude's kid. Not only that, but the dude was practically terminally ill. He spends most of the time living in a hospital bed due to being born with only one kidney. I'm not making fun of the fact, but what I did call my now ex-wife out for was that she basically Dear John'd me. Never saw that stupid movie, but I'm familiar with the premise. Stupidest idea for a love story. And I feel sorry for their child. I heard it was born with quite a few health issues and physical deformalities. It was both of their first child, and after all that time she spent pestering and pestering and pestering me about having a kid, like every effing day. I want kids now! That's how the amazing act of childbearing that she longed for since we first met went for her. I'm not going to sit and cruelly say that it's an act of God or something, but that's probably a good headline for why you shouldn't commit adultery when you've tied the knot with someone else. Story number 68. It was 10 years ago, so I'll just give the bullet points. She was on meth the whole time we were together. She started pushing me for marriage after only 2 months of dating. She was a master manipulator and a psycho, so she learned pretty quickly how to keep me compliant. She was very narcissistic and incredibly abusive verbally and mentally. She was cheating on me the whole time we were together. She ran off and cheated on me 2 days after our wedding. Another guy she was cheating with came to our apartment and told me everything that was going on, so I packed my crap and left. We were together for a little over a year, but our marriage lasted only maybe 3 months tops. 10 years later, I'm happily remarried to the best wife any man could ask for, and we have built a great life together. So, everything worked out. Story number 69. Okay, I want to preface this with a couple of things. 1. Mine doesn't really fit the criteria exactly, but it only lasted a year and 2 months. We were only together 3 years total. Met online, he hitchhiked to my town to meet me in person, and then we just got an apartment together. 2 years later, and we were married. And 2, I am certainly not innocent in all of this. I had an online affair and eventually after time and again discussing separation, just left him for my now partner. So ultimately, I just realized I was entirely unhappy, but there were little signs I feel like I should have trusted my instincts about. He was a chronic liar, from day one lying about sexual conquests to sound cool or something. He had a sob story about his childhood friend whom he was in love with that died when she fell through the ice on a snow machine. I was pretty surprised when she came to our wedding 2 years later. He had school debt that he forgot about. My mom paid off in a lump sum for him and allowed him to pay her back interest fee. The second big one I didn't find out about until months before our wedding, at which point I told my mom I was having doubts. I should have ended it right there. He also had a rude personality, wouldn't even try to make nice with my friends, was rude to waitresses. I am very shy and non-confrontational, so I hated that. He used to speak to me in this fake abusive way when we were in public, like use this clenched teeth voice and say that I better do X or Y, or he'd give me a black eye. It was never serious, but there were times women would look at me in this terrible, pitying way, and I hated how that felt. I told him that I didn't like it and thought he understood, but it continued. After we split up, he messaged all of my friends to tell them exactly how I had cheated on him and what a terrible person I was. Told someone about a make-up pregnancy scare that never happened. We were going like 4 months between sex at that point anyway, and put some comments on Imgur about how we had been together for 5 years and married for 3, which we hadn't even known each other for 5 years at that point. It was weird. 4 years later, and I'm still happily with the person I left him for, with 2 beautiful children. I love all 3 to bits. He is with someone else as well, also with a child, and setting up GoFundMe pages to have his dental bills paid for. I have never once regretted leaving. I know I will be judged for being the unfaithful one, but it happened, and I can't take it back now. In any case, do what makes you happy and forget the rest. maybe just make it a bit less of a mess than I did. Story number 70. Right after the I do, it was picture time. She tells me to hold on a second. She had some pictures with certain family that she had to get to. They were from out of state and we haven't seen them in years, so I understood. I talk with people, time passes, and my grandmother comes by to me and says, "Why aren't you in any of the pictures?" Confused, I look around and they have an assembly line of her family taking different combinations of photos. Like, let's get a pic of all 4 cousins, switch out the photographer and repeat the same picture, then everyone over 50 or all the kids, so on and so forth. I go to my wife and then I ask, "Is everything okay? Do you need me in some pictures?" And she explains there are a couple of more combinations of people they really want to get to and she will let me know. Kind of feeling odd, I smile, nod, and walk away. 10 minutes later, she comes, grabs me by the arm, and we start walking through the venue. I'm thinking we were going to get a better spot to get our photos done. Nope, she was taking me to where the food was. Picture time was over. During a fight later, this chick told me that I wasn't in the wedding pictures because she wanted to get pictures of her older family before they died. Story number 71. My wife's maid of honor's marriage lasted 7 hours. They made it through the 5-hour reception, and she knew it was over within the first 2 hours they were married and alone. She had told us that after not having sex for the last 3 years of their 5-year relationship, they went to the bedroom in the hotel, and her husband didn't get aroused regardless of what she did. They argued, and he left. She left him a letter after packing her things and leaving their home, informing him she was seeking an annulment. He confided in a friend who later spilled the beans that he only went along with the wedding because it was easier than breaking up. Then, a few weeks later, he was caught by the police having sex with some woman in a car somewhere. We found out that this woman looked rough, like meth rough. It turns out she wasn't on meth, she just didn't take care of herself. Rotting teeth, always looked like she was sweating or dirty. Meanwhile, this guy's ex-wife was a full-on hottie. This obviously irked his ex-wife a great deal. Story number 72. Made it all of 8 months. He stopped flossing, left literal crap stains on the toilet seat, complained when I begged him to shower before oral sex. The smell was gross and I had already gotten an infection. I cleaned everything. He cut me off from my family and close friends. He'd throw massive fights when I'd go get coffee with the girls or celebrated a birthday with one of my best friends. Complained when I worked overtime so we could pay our bills. Forced us both into debt and my credit took a negative 250-point deep dive. Acted like a spoiled brat around his mother who gave him everything. Gained 75 pounds after we moved in together and threw fits when I refused to eat the same food as him. Talked non-stop only about himself. I couldn't even think or breathe or function for a moment, but I always had to choose the things he wanted to watch, play, or listen to. The minute he came home, I'd have to turn everything off of mine and give him my undivided attention for the rest of the night. I met and fell in love with a man at work a few months into the marriage from hell who is amazing, and I'm still with him almost a year later. He helped me realize I was being emotionally abused to the point my therapist recommended I admit myself to a psych hospital for danger to myself. There was severe wanting to self-unalive ideation, letting go of the steering wheel when driving, extreme mental and emotional stress that presented in my skin whitening and eyes sunken in. My coworkers tried intervening and feeding me and asked if I was okay. It's only been about 9 months since I left my ex-husband, and I'm halfway through the divorce process. I'm currently pregnant with a dog and a partner who helped me escape the emotional abuse. And I'm happy I never went to see that financial and emotional leech ever again. He was the definition of insufferable. Had I not met my new partner and had he not showed me that I could be treated well, I probably, honestly, wouldn't be alive. I had about 3 severe emotional breakdowns and panic attacks were on the daily with my ex. I just couldn't do it. I left the house one night after he got upset at me over running in the house to get a painful eye out, leaving him on the car, and he screamed, "Not everything is about you," and went to the bathroom. I grabbed my keys and bolted. I tried to leave once previously, but he ran after me literally and started trying to open the door. I panicked and tried to leave and crashed my car into a trash can and went full-blown nervous breakdown. Story number 73. I'm sure my once best friend will be one of these cases because the replies pattern here. Long story, I mean really long. She met him before high school. We were 14 and he was 20. I know he's the first and only guy she has been with. I believe they'll be one of those short weddings. They never lived together. They are never really alone. Both live with their parents, and when they are together at home, the parents are there, of course. They fight like crazy. He uses a passive-aggressive tone with her all the time like she was dumb or still 14 years old. She's depressed and anxious, doesn't go to therapy because he talks to me, he knows things, according to her, and I warn her every year, every day damn year. That's not how marriage works. That living with someone is different than dating someone. Yet she claims I don't know anything because she's been with him since 2009 and I'm only 6 years total with my husband. Nowadays, they like to pretend to be rich and fancy. Showed off the engagement ring, sharing its price on Instagram, and she texts me sometimes saying she's sad because he doesn't give her attention but pays for her international trips. She shares all the details to their wedding online, like the receipts, the decoration, prices, and etc. And I know it's all a facade because she told me her parents are paying for the fancy wedding, but they're in debt. I probably won't be invited to the wedding because the fiance thinks I'm a huge B word for living my life, always working since I was a teenager, sometimes dating, sometimes not. Now I'm happily married. I liked to party when I was younger too, you know, the usual person stuff. He tells her I'm a bad influence. The wedding is next year in July. I loved this girl like the sister I never had, and it just makes me miserable. Story number 74. My first indication was that the sex started to slow down. We were in our early 20s and I had a high libido. Then he started hanging around in his underwear all the time. Then he became not okay with my smoking, even though he knew and was okay with it when we first got together. Then he started with harebrained schemes on how to make money that required me to donate parts of my paycheck to cover, and then they didn't work. Then it was the guitar taking up more and more of his time. He didn't want a wife. He wanted another mom, and I just wasn't prepared for that. He seemed pretty progressive, but the more I knew him, the more he clung to whatever his overtly Christian mom would tell him. When I told him I wanted a divorce, he didn't even fight to keep me. He just kicked me out, changed the locks, and put what he considered my stuff on the porch. He installed a webcam because he thought I was going to rob him or something, and he just got mad and angry I wanted to leave and was total sour grapes about the whole thing. We were 22 and 23. His life was far from ruined. I had hardly wasted any of his youth, but here he was complaining that our 2.5 years dating and 9 months of marriage was going to ruin his chances, as if he were an old man with no time left. Dude, you hang out in your apartment in your dirty tighty-whities, play guitar, and try and make playable Nintendo cartridges by reflashing the EEPROM chips. You have nothing to offer. Okay, so first off, I'm a gamer and I have no idea what reflashing the EEPROM chips means. I'll have to look into that. And two, if I was a woman and I was dating and I was looking for a man, there's one thing I would be so horrified of, beyond the obvious stuff like racism or being a League of Legends player, but the thing I personally would be horrified of is dating a mama's boy, like an overtly clingy, listens to everything she says mama's boy, because I have heard some stories online and I want to tear my hair out in solidarity for some of those women. Oh my god, they're awful. Anyway, next story. Story number 75. I got into a rebound relationship with a guy I didn't really like, honestly. I had known him for a while and he was always sweet and kind to me and I didn't feel anything for him, but I was feeling hopeless about relationships and he really liked me and I felt bad and thought maybe I could eventually come to love him. I got pregnant and we married because of pressure from him and his family, and immediately after we got married, the real him came out. He was a classic narcissist. Anytime I didn't agree with him, we got into a huge fight because I was crushing his ideas. Like, he went from liberal, like me, to completely creationist. He didn't believe in planets, and all science was just people trying to disprove God. That gay people shouldn't adopt children because they will SA them, because that's the reason they're gay, and that he wanted me to stop working to be a stay-at-home mother. To each his own, but I like working, and this was never my plan, and he used to always say that he admired my dedication to my work. He worked 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to like 7 or 8, and began drinking heavily, so that every night when he got home, he picked a fight, found a way to blame everything on me, said I was teaching our baby to hate him, and then he woke up the next day and wouldn't remember anything and wouldn't understand why I was mad at the things he said. Everything I said to him, or anyone said, was taken to the worst possible extreme. He had to constantly show everyone how superior he was, and was constantly bragging. I remember him getting pissed when his best, and only friend, got the same fancy credit card as him. He honestly saw it as disrespectful and cut off any contact with him. Every time I looked at him, I remember thinking, God, you're such an idiot and I hate you so much. Anyway, I knew it was over within a few months and I had made a huge mistake, but I only left him after about 1.5 years because I just felt embarrassed for making the mistake of marrying him. We were in the process of buying a $1.4 million home and I just thought, F it. I'm going to be tied to him for the rest of my life if I go through with this. So I packed my stuff that day that we were supposed to sign the purchase and sale and took my daughter with me and went to my parents' house. I've remarried since to an absolutely wonderful man, and I'm so happy I made the decision to leave him. Story number 77. Had this lady friend that was a bit of a drama queen, but kept at a distance. She was fine as a friend. One day, she introduced me to her new boyfriend. Cool dude, we were into the same things, similar love of video games, anime, etc. But I didn't see the relationship lasting due to her aforementioned drama-loving nature. Much to my surprise, they announced their engagement a year or so later. I wanted to grab him and go, "No, dude," but you can't. If people are in love and you try to mess with that, you will just be the a-hole in the story that they will tell. From what he told me later, it was just drama from day one. Yelling obscenities at him in public settings, showing up at his work to B-word and complain about something inconsequential. 6 months in, he sat her down and basically told her, "This has been the worst 6 months of my life. Something has to change." And under pressure from parents, both sides, they agreed to marriage counseling. But that went nowhere, and after another 3, they split. So I made a cool new friend and lost a drama queen all in one. This was 20-odd years ago, and we are still friends today. He's now married again to an awesome woman who gets along with my wife as well. I started a new job recently and ran into Miss Drama Queen. 20 years has not been kind to her, to say the least. She turned into those stereotypical jaded splinters that hate men and has to complain about everything. You know the type. They have to speak up in every meeting to find fault with something someone said and point out the issues in a self-important way. Still don't know what he saw in her. Maybe she gave amazing head. Story number 78. My cousin's first wife, and like 14th, I'll explain this in a bit, was a straight-up psycho. He knocked her up and did the old-school thing of marrying her so the child wouldn't be born out of wedlock. A week later, she throws him down a flight of stairs and files for divorce. He doesn't press charges and just goes along with the divorce. When she's about 3 months pregnant, she calls him crying that she loves him and doesn't want their child born and growing out of wedlock. So they get married again. Once again, she has a fit, throws herself belly first on the floor kicking and screaming, then she goes and files for divorce. Once again, she's 8 months pregnant and reaches out to my cousin again. My cousin decides that maybe having an actual wedding will do the trick, like a true idiot, and they get married and the wedding is going well thus far. Halfway through the reception, she has another fit, leaves the reception like a madwoman, runs across the street, we're from New York City so you know traffic is insane, and nearly gets hit by a car and starts yelling from across the street that she wants a divorce. To keep this short, let's just say that this pattern continued until their son was about 3 years old and they finally divorced for good. I didn't even think you could get married and divorced so quickly as this psycho woman and my idiot cousin did. Story number 79. I can't remember exactly how long the marriage lasted, no longer than 1.5 years. This was the older brother of a high school friend. He met and started dating a girl that his family and friends didn't really care for. She didn't really seem terrible, but wasn't real bright or social, and you could tell he treated her well and she took advantage of his kindness. They got married in a pretty short amount of time after starting to date, and his friends were concerned. They had a baby basically exactly 9 months after their wedding. It was his parents' first grandchild, and he was even born on his dad's birthday. I don't know if they had a decent relationship or not, but about a year into the marriage, she had a friend who broke up with her boyfriend. Apparently, the boyfriend knew some dirt, and once they broke up, he decided to tell the husband what he knew about his wife. He left a voicemail saying that she had slept with someone in Vegas during her bachelorette party, which he knew about from his recent ex-girlfriend. He got a paternity test, and the kid wasn't his. Poor guy was really nice and didn't deserve it. They got divorced immediately, and I know he struggled a lot with addiction in the years after. I don't know how he is now, but I heard he had finally been getting better. Story number 80. So here we go. Met in church, dated for a year, no premarital sex, didn't live together beforehand, married in the church. Everything was perfect until the day after the wedding. It started with mental abuse. Wanted me to sell my business, quit my job, don't talk to friends or family. Within weeks, it was physical abuse. I went to stay with a friend, and she had a local cop who was her ex stalking me and reported my whereabouts to her nightly. Now, she was perfect pre-marriage. Pageant girl growing up all the way to winning for her university. Teacher, musically talented, funny, and drop dead 10 out of 10 beautiful and sexy. Post-marriage, it was incredible sex. Oral to finish, butt stuff, toys, dress up, the whole works, and she could cook her ass off. Perfection. And bipolar as hell. I eventually met her ex, and that is why he left. But the final straw was when she got mad and slapped me. I have never been hit by a woman before, and my natural reaction was to just return the slap. It was almost instantaneous, without premeditation. I didn't even leave a mark on her. She called the cops, I gathered my belongings that I needed, and went to my truck and waited for the cops. This is 3 months after our wedding. One cop spoke to me while the other spoke to her. They switched spots and spoke to us both. They spoke to each other and put her in cuffs. I told them I would leave if they could come up with another resolution. So they gave us both Class C misdemeanor tickets and I left. I went back while she was at work the next day and got the rest of my stuff and moved in with a friend, and within 6 months the marriage was dissolved and annulled. Crazy sex is the best sex. Live together before you get married, folks, and meet all of your partner's exes and friends before you commit is my advice. Story number 81. It lasted 1 year and a little bit, but 7 months into the marriage, I made a New Year's resolution to finally get out. We were in the airport parking lot after a holiday trip. I don't remember how, but he made money by taking advantage of places with generous return policies. He had a computer he was going to return as a part of that scam, but he didn't have time before he left, so he decided to hide the computer under the car seat. I didn't know about it, and when we got back to the car a week later, he got pissed off at the car seat because it wouldn't move back, so he hulked out and angrily attacked the car seat to force it back, which crushed the box and scratched the computer that he forgot about. Then he screamed at me for letting him do that, followed by a 3-hour lecture and screaming session on the drive home about how worthless I was, how I needed to get my life together. I was too boring to make friends. I couldn't do anything right without his help. Sadly, this was a pretty normal occurrence, but for some reason that time I had enough and promised myself to find a way out that year. But I should have known when my best friend's mom came up to congratulate me at the wedding and said, "Wasn't it just beautiful to be up there with him? Didn't time just stop and it felt like all that mattered in the world was you two and your love for each other?" And I don't know what I said, but my thought was, ew, no, we don't even like each other that much. Story number 82. I married my high school sweetheart when he joined the military so we could stay together. A stupid idea that sounded wonderful at the time. We lived on base together for 3 months, during which time he only spoke to me if he needed me to look up how to do something in a video game or ask me, "What's for dinner?" The housing area was several miles away from the gate of the base, and I didn't have a vehicle, so I was stuck without options to get a job. And he kept his entire paycheck, plus some kind of spousal support that I was supposedly entitled to. I never figured that out, but the Army contacted me and paid me months after I left him. Well, when we took a week-long trip back to our hometown, he left me at my friend's house with no money or transportation. In the end, I borrowed my mom's old car under the condition that no one else could drive it. Well, I had his bank login details, so after calling him to ask if he wanted to get dinner together after not seeing him for 2 days, he told me we didn't have enough to go out anywhere fancy. I checked, and he had spent $200 per meal since we got back at Chili's, Red Lobster, Outback, and a couple of other places. I was relying on my friend's generosity to eat and go places. He was treating his friends to dinner every night without a second thought. I didn't confront him, but the final straw was I finally convinced him to go to lunch with me and my mom, and he asked for his GPS back. We had to use it to go to the beach, so it was in my mom's car, and after pressing for information, he revealed he was going to Waco, 3 hours away, to visit his family, and as an afterthought, he said, "Oh, did you want to go? It's my family." I realized then that I didn't want to continue feeling like a mother and convenient servant doing his laundry, cooking, and cleaning for him. So I told him to go back alone and mail me my things. Now here's what should have been my wake-up call. After 3 weeks on base, I got the flu and he never brought me food. I had to crawl to the bathroom to get water from the tub faucet because I couldn't stand up. After being sick for a few days, he came into the bedroom and said to me, "Are you cooking dinner tonight? I'm tired of fast food burgers." I was able to get myself to the kitchen the next day and hoard the loaf of bread. Oh, also, he was sleeping in the living room because he didn't want to get sick. Honestly, I can go on, but here's some other fun red flag type incidents. During the beach trip, he threw a tantrum because I wouldn't let him drive, again due to my mother's condition of only letting me drive. Plus, he didn't even have a license. I'm talking yelling, pouting, silent treatment, the works. Then I cooked dinner most every night and served him his food and drink so he could unwind after work. Well, on my birthday, he cooked dinner, hot dogs. I would appreciate the gesture, but he served himself and said, "There's hot dogs if you want some," and left it at that. No happy birthday or anything. Then my wedding ring was his mom's ring, which was his dad's class ring. I specifically told him I was uncomfortable having it as our ring, for lots of reasons, and we used it anyway because it was better. Then when he washed dishes, which was like 3 times, he only washed the top of the plates and left the bottom greasy and covered in food, so of course I had to do them again anyway. He also bought precisely 3 pieces of furniture: a bed, an entertainment center for the TV and Xbox, and 1 cozy chair for him to play games in. I sat on the floor with my laptop whenever he was home. And finally, his computer password hint was "the most beautiful girl in the world," and the answer was the name of his old classmate. Not that he should have thought of me as the most beautiful girl ever, but it hurt for him to casually tell me his computer password when he needed game directions and see the hint. Yay, caps lock. And look, by no means was I innocent of issues as well, but we shouldn't have married so young, right out of high school and boot camp, and he didn't want a partner. He wanted a parent. Story number 83. Was with this girl for 5 years, and during that time she went through 6 or 7 jobs. Didn't really bother me because she held her own most of the time. After a deployment and pressure from my family, I decided I should tie the knot. Had a destination wedding in Jamaica, was really nice, and about 15 months into it at Thanksgiving is when the switch flipped. I had invited a buddy who was a chef over to help me cook Thanksgiving dinner. Guy is like family to me, and I would definitely take a bullet for him. While we are prepping it, she goes off the deep end, yelling at me for making him do everything and not doing it traditionally the way we have the prior years. I was assisting every step of the way, and I told her this and told her to go back and watch TV. And to think, she replied by throwing a punch and hitting me in the forehead, which I laughed, being a soldier, but I couldn't believe she would throw a punch. My friend was in shock, and we continued, and I told him not to worry about it. While that was the start of it, it became a quickly toxic relationship where she started cutting friends out because she didn't like them or they didn't pay attention to her. Her own best friend started dating my best friend, and she cut her off because she hated my best friend, and she ignored her during the Halloween party where they met up. While the toxicity started getting worse to the point I installed a security camera system because I was afraid she would try something, I offered her an ultimatum saying her behavior and physical attacks are unacceptable, and I would give her 3 months to try and improve and to see a therapist. Well, come November after my party, we had a really nice day out, and I took her to a really swanky dinner and movie, got home late, and I wanted to play some Rainbow Six Siege. So I went to my office, came up to grab a glass of water, and was pushed down the stairs, and the door slammed shut behind me. I came up to confront her, and she smacked me 5 or 6 times and kicked me between the legs 3 times. It was then I signed the papers and went to the court and dropped them off. But because I was nice, I allowed her to live in my house for a year after it was finalized under the rule she wouldn't bring any dates or boyfriends to the house, and I would do the same. Upon breach of this, she would be evicted. She agreed, so eventually she brought a boy over and on camera was making out with him, and I confronted her and told her she can move out for breach of contract since she was not paying any bills at this point. She left for work the next day, and I changed all the locks on the house. She called the police and tried to say I hit her, and the police took my side and walked me to my backyard and gave me advice and told me to go through proper channels and give her 30 days. I agreed, and that's how I finally got mostly free. Still finalizing a co-signed car, which hopefully will be fixed tomorrow, but man, I can see how toxic she really is now. This isn't all of it, but I figure this was the point that the flip hit that I needed to change things. We were married for a year and some odd change. She also interfered with a date I had at PAX East after the divorce was finalized by showing up with her girlfriend because her then friend at the time saw me and this other girl at a bar during a Pokemon pub crawl. So I have to say, the fact that OP was kicked in the manhood 3 times and was like, yeah, you can still stay for a year, he has better resolve than me, because if that was me, I would have picked her up, spinned her over my head, did the attitude adjustment, then picked her up by the legs and did the Claudio swing right out the door. It's a couple of wrestling references for you. But it really does horrify me in some ways that so many of these people took off the mask after the wedding, after everything was official. They're like, oh, you don't know what you've gotten yourself into. I think Kanye West is a great moral figure. I'm a super homophobe. I'm like, oh no. However, the silver lining in all 82 of these stories is the fact that these are all stories after the relationship is ended, after people have realized their worth, after realizing who their partners really are and how they treat them, you know, with stories of people now telling them from being in a better spot, now with better partners, just improved situations in general. So we can take comfort in that. But anyway, guys, we are at the end of the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a really good day, and bye-bye!